It looked like nothing more than kindness, until the girl whispered something that stopped his heart. "Mommy says you're my daddy." From that day on, their worlds collided, a humble man with a painful past and a child desperate for a father. But when a cruel rumor and a buried scandal tear them apart, he's forced to choose between protecting her from the storm or fighting for the family they've built. When love faces lies and truth costs everything, how far will he go to keep her? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The afternoon rain drummed against the windows of Willow Creek Elementary, casting long shadows through the empty hallways. Marcus Hayes pushed his mop with practiced ease, humming softly to himself as he worked. After 32 years of keeping schools clean and safe, he knew every crack in these floors, every scuff mark that refused to fade. A small sound caught his attention, barely audible over the steady swish of his mop. He paused, tilting his head to listen. There it was again, a quiet sniff followed by a shaky breath. Marcus rounded the corner and spotted her. A tiny figure sitting cross-legged on the floor, her pink backpack propped against the wall beside her. Her dark curls hung forward, hiding her face, but her shoulders trembled with each silent sob. He recognized her from his morning rounds, Chloe Westbrook, one of the first graders. Usually, she bounced through these halls like sunshine, greeting everyone with a gap-toothed smile. Seeing her so distraught made his heart ache. Marcus set his mop against the wall with careful quietness. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to help a hurting child was to move slow and gentle, like approaching a wounded bird. His hand went to his pocket, finding the small plastic bottle that had been his constant companion for over 3 decades. The bottle was nothing special, just a dollar store container of soap solution. But his Sarah had given it to him on his first day as a school janitor, telling him with that beautiful smile of hers, "Sometimes all it takes is a little magic to turn tears into laughter." Marcus unscrewed the cap and dipped the plastic wand into the solution. With practiced ease, he lifted it to his lips and blew softly. A stream of iridescent bubbles floated through the air, catching the gray afternoon light. They danced and swirled, some drifting down toward Chloe's bowed head. One bubble landed on her arm with a tiny pop. Chloe's head jerked up, her tear-stained face registering surprise. Another bubble floated past her nose, and despite herself, she let out a watery giggle. Marcus blew another stream of bubbles, these ones bigger and slower. Chloe's eyes followed their path, wonder replacing some of the sadness on her small face. When a particularly large bubble wobbled past, she reached out instinctively to catch it. "You know what my wife used to say about bubbles?" Marcus asked softly, keeping his voice warm and gentle. "She said they're like little pieces of rainbow that decided to go exploring." Chloe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, watching as more bubbles filled the air around her. "Really? Really?" Marcus knelt down, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel crowded. "Would you like to try making some yourself?" Chloe nodded, her earlier distress momentarily forgotten. Marcus held out the bubble wand, and she took it with careful fingers. "Now, the trick is to blow soft and steady," he demonstrated with his hands. "Like you're trying to cool down hot chocolate." Chloe's first attempt was too forceful, sending soap solution spraying. But Marcus just chuckled warmly. "That's okay. Try again, just a little gentler this time." Her second try produced a stream of perfect bubbles. Chloe's face lit up with delight, and she scrambled to her feet to chase them down the hallway. Unknown to both of them, Eleanor Westbrook stood frozen in the doorway of the school's main office, her designer handbag clutched tightly in manicured fingers. She'd arrived early to pick up Chloe, only to find this scene unfolding before her. Eleanor watched as her daughter danced through the shower of bubbles, her earlier tears forgotten. The janitor, she'd seen him before but never really noticed him, handled the situation with a gentleness that made her throat tight. No condescending questions, no demands for explanation. Just bubbles and patience and understanding. Something about his manner struck a chord in Eleanor's carefully maintained composure. Perhaps it was the way he knelt down to Chloe's level, or how his deep voice carried such genuine warmth. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something about his profile in the gray afternoon light that tugged at old memories she'd long since buried. Marcus was showing Chloe how to make a giant bubble by moving the wand slowly through the air when he finally noticed their audience. He straightened up immediately, his expression becoming more reserved. "Mrs. Westbrook, I hope you don't mind. I saw your daughter was upset." But Eleanor surprised herself by smiling, a real smile that softened her usually stern features. "Mind? No, I don't mind at all." She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Thank you, actually. It's been a while since I've seen her smile like that." Chloe spun around at the sound of her mother's voice. "Mommy, look what I can do." She blew another stream of bubbles, beaming with pride. "I see, sweetheart. That's wonderful." Eleanor's voice held a warmth that matched the moment. She turned back to Marcus, really looking at him for the first time. Most people would have just walked past or asked what was wrong. But Bubbles. She shook her head, still smiling. That was inspired. Marcus ducked his head slightly, embarrassed by the praise. "Sometimes words just make things harder. My Sarah, my late wife, she taught me that. Kids need space to feel what they're feeling, and sometimes a little distraction helps them find their way back to happiness." Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes at the mention of loss, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. She opened her mouth as if to say more, but Chloe tugged at her sleeve. "Can we get bubble solution for home, please?" Chloe bounced on her toes, all traces of her earlier sadness gone. "We'll see," Eleanor said, but her tone was indulgent. She reached for Chloe's backpack, then paused. "I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "Marcus Hayes, ma'am." "Well, Mr. Hayes, thank you for being so kind to my daughter. It means more than you know." Marcus accepted the small bottle back from Chloe, tucking it into his pocket where it had lived for so many years. "Any time, Mrs. Westbrook, any time at all." A soft pop broke the silence as the bubble landed on Chloe's arm. She lifted her head, revealing tear-stained cheeks and red-rimmed eyes. But as more bubbles floated around her, a tiny smile began to form. Marcus blew another stream of bubbles, these ones larger and slower. Chloe's eyes widened with wonder. She reached out, trying to catch them as they drifted past. "Would you like to try?" Marcus asked gently, holding out the bubble wand. Chloe nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. She stood up, smoothing her rumpled Navy school uniform. Her small fingers wrapped around the plastic wand as Marcus showed her how to dip it just right. "Now, blow soft and steady," he instructed, demonstrating with his hands, "like you're whispering a secret." Chloe's first attempt sent tiny droplets everywhere, making her giggle. But on her second try, a perfect stream of bubbles filled the air. Her whole face lit up with delight. "I did it!" she exclaimed, jumping up and down. "Look how many!" "You sure did," Marcus smiled, his weathered face creasing with warmth. "You're a natural bubble maker." From the doorway came the soft click of heels on tile. Marcus turned to see a tall woman in an elegant gray suit watching them. Her dark hair was swept back in a sleek twist, and pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light. Despite her polished appearance, there was something tender in her expression as she observed her daughter. "Mommy," Chloe called out, running to her with the bubble wand still in hand. "Look what Mr." She paused, realizing she didn't know his name. "Hayes," Marcus supplied quietly. "Marcus Hayes. Look what Mr. Hayes showed me. Can we get bubbles at home, please?" Eleanor Westbrook's lips curved into a gentle smile as she smoothed her daughter's hair. "We'll see, sweetheart. Why don't you pack up your things while I talk to Mr. Hayes?" As Chloe skipped back to her backpack, Eleanor approached Marcus, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor Westbrook. I want to thank you for being so kind to Chloe. She's had a difficult day." Marcus shook her hand, noting her firm but warm grip. "No thanks needed, Mrs. Westbrook. Sometimes a little fun is the best medicine." Please, call me Eleanor. She glanced at his worn army jacket, noticing the patches. You served? Marcus nodded, unconsciously straightening his shoulders. Yes, ma'am. 2 tours in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne. Seems like a lifetime ago now. Thank you for your service, Eleanor said sincerely. Do you have children of your own? A daughter, Marcus replied, his eyes softening. Lisa. She's all grown now, working as a nurse in Seattle. Makes her old dad proud every day. Eleanor's professional facade warmed slightly. It's not easy, is it, raising a child on your own? No, ma'am, it's not. Marcus glanced at Chloe, who was carefully zipping up her backpack. But it's worth every minute. I'm ready, Mommy, Chloe announced, bouncing back to them. She held out the bubble wand to Marcus. Thank you for letting me play. Marcus knelt down to her level, taking the wand with exaggerated ceremony. You're very welcome, Miss Chloe. Remember, whenever you're feeling sad, there's always a little magic waiting to happen. Chloe surprised him with a quick hug before taking her mother's hand. Eleanor's eyes met Marcus's over her daughter's head, conveying silent gratitude. Have a good evening, Mr. Hayes, Eleanor said, leading Chloe toward the exit. You too, Mrs. Westbrook, Miss Chloe. Marcus watched them go, then picked up his mop to finish his rounds. Later that evening, Marcus unlocked the door to his small apartment on Oak Street. The familiar scent of lemon cleaning products and old books greeted him. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door, next to Sarah's favorite summer shawl that he could never bring himself to move. The microwave hummed as he heated up a container of leftover chicken and rice. While he waited, Marcus walked over to the mantel where Sarah's photo sat in its silver frame. She was laughing in the picture, her head thrown back, sunshine catching in her dark curls. It had been taken at Lisa's high school graduation, just months before the cancer diagnosis. Marcus picked up the frame, running his thumb along its edge. Met a sweet little girl today, Sarah, he said softly. Reminded me of you, the way she lit up over something as simple as soap bubbles. He smiled at the memory. You always said the smallest kindnesses matter most. Guess you were right about that, like you were about most things. The microwave beeped, but Marcus kept talking to the photograph for a moment longer. I miss you, baby. Every single day. He set the frame back carefully, adjusting it to catch the evening light just so. As he ate his dinner at the small kitchen table, Marcus thought about Chloe's tears and subsequent joy, about Eleanor's guarded gratitude, about his own daughter so far away. The rain had stopped, and through his window, he could see the last rays of sunset painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. He'd learned long ago that life rarely went according to plan, but sometimes, like today, it offered unexpected moments of grace. Marcus finished his meal, washed his dishes, and settled into his worn armchair with a book, content in the quiet of his simple routine. The morning sun warmed Marcus's face as he watched over the playground during recess. His mop rested against the brick wall behind him, while gleaming bubbles occasionally drifted past. A few kids had brought their own bottles after seeing Chloe with hers yesterday. He smiled, remembering how the little girl's face had lit up. It reminded him of his own daughter at that age, though Shannon was grown now with a life of her own in Colorado. His chest tightened with familiar longing. He should call her this weekend. The playground buzzed with activity. Jump ropes slapped against concrete, basketballs bounced on the court, and children's laughter carried on the autumn breeze. Marcus kept a watchful eye, ready to help with scraped knees or settling disputes. Mr. Hayes. He turned at the sound of running feet and saw Chloe racing toward him, her dark braids bouncing, navy uniform slightly rumpled. Her face glowed with excitement. Well, hello there, Miss Chloe, he said warmly. Having fun today? She skidded to a stop in front of him, slightly out of breath. Looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers, she beckoned him closer with one small finger. Marcus crouched down to her level, playing along with her secretive manner. Mommy says you're my daddy, she whispered, her brown eyes bright and earnest. Marcus felt like all the air had been sucked from his lungs. He stared at her, unable to form words as his mind spun with confusion. Before he could respond, the bell rang its sharp warning. "Gotta go," Chloe chirped, already turning to join the crowd of students streaming toward the building. "Bye, Mr. Hayes." He remained crouched, watching her disappear inside. His knees creaked as he finally straightened, picking up his mop with hands that didn't feel quite steady. What had Eleanor told her daughter? And more importantly, why? The afternoon crawled by in a daze. Marcus went through his usual routine, mopping floors, checking bathrooms, replacing paper towels, but his thoughts kept circling back to Chloe's words. It made no sense. He'd never met Eleanor before this week, and he certainly had no connection to their family. At 3 o'clock, he was cleaning windows near the front entrance when a familiar clicking of heels approached. He turned to find Eleanor Westbrook standing there, looking somehow both confident and uncertain. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, "do you have a moment to talk?" He set down his cleaning supplies. "Yes, ma'am, though I think we need to discuss what Chloe told me at recess." Eleanor glanced around the emptying hallway. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" Marcus led her to the small break room off the main office. It wasn't much, just a few chairs around a scratched table, a mini fridge, and a coffee maker that had seen better days. But it was private. Eleanor perched on one of the chairs, smoothing her cream-colored skirt. Marcus sat across from her, waiting. "I know this must seem incredibly strange," she began, her perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly in her lap. "And I apologize for Chloe approaching you like that. She's enthusiastic when she gets an idea in her head." "Mrs. Westbrook, Eleanor," Marcus said carefully, "I don't understand what's going on here. Why would Chloe think I'm her father?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "My late husband James served in Vietnam. He was with the 101st Airborne Division like you." She paused, studying Marcus's face. "When I saw you with Chloe the other day, something about you reminded me so strongly of him. The way you moved, your smile, even how you handled her tears." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, lots of men served in the 101st. That doesn't mean—" "James had a brother," Eleanor interrupted softly. "A half-brother he never met, from before his father married James's mother. All we knew was that the brother was born in Georgia, like you, and that he also served in Vietnam." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a worn photograph. "This is James." Marcus took the photo with careful fingers. It showed a young man in dress uniform, smiling at the camera. There was something familiar about the set of his jaw, the way he held himself. "James never got to meet Chloe," Eleanor continued, her voice thick with emotion. "He died in a car accident while I was pregnant, when I saw you with her. The resemblance is remarkable. And then I learned you served in the same unit, came from the same state." "You think I might be James's half-brother," Marcus said slowly. "And that would make me connected to Chloe, yes." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "I know this is a lot to take in, and I shouldn't have let Chloe jump to conclusions before speaking with you properly. But would you be willing to meet again, to talk more about this? There's so much more to discuss." Marcus stared at the photograph, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to deny it all, to walk away from this complicated situation. But another part, the part that had instantly connected with that crying little girl, wanted to know more. "I'll need time to think about this," he said finally, handing the photo back. "It's quite a shock." Eleanor nodded, standing gracefully. "Of course, here's my card. Please call me when you're ready to talk." She placed a cream-colored business card on the table. "And Mr. Hayes, thank you for being so kind to Chloe, regardless of everything else." Marcus watched her leave, the card sitting heavy on the table between them. Through the break room window, he could see Chloe waiting by their car, waving excitedly when she spotted him. He lifted his hand in a small wave back, his heart tight with unexpected emotion. The corner cafe was almost empty at 8 a.m., just as Eleanor had requested. Marcus arrived early, his worn leather jacket protecting him from the autumn chill. The place was smaller than he expected, cozy with warm wood panels and the rich scent of coffee in the air. A bell tinkled softly as he stepped inside. He chose a quiet booth near the back, away from the windows. His calloused hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of black coffee as he waited, watching steam rise in delicate swirls. The conversation ahead weighed heavily on his mind. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. But there was something different about her today. Her usual polish seemed slightly cracked. Dark circles showed faintly under her eyes, despite careful makeup. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Hayes," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Marcus, please." He gestured to the waiting coffee pot. "Would you like some?" "Yes, thank you." She poured herself a cup, adding a splash of cream. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred. "I imagine you have questions about what Chloe said yesterday." Marcus nodded slowly. "It caught me off guard, I'll admit that much. I should explain." Eleanor took a careful sip of coffee, then set the cup down. "My late husband, Charles. There was a period, about 7 years ago, when we separated briefly. It wasn't public knowledge. We kept it very quiet. But during those 3 months, She paused, choosing her words. He had a relationship with someone else." Marcus's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure I understand what this has to do with me." Eleanor reached into her leather briefcase and withdrew a photograph, sliding it across the table. "This was taken during that time." Marcus picked up the photo. It showed a younger Charles Westbrook at what appeared to be a military fundraiser, wearing a tuxedo. The man had Marcus's height and build, and there was something in the way he held himself. Military straight, shoulders back. The resemblance was striking. "I see why you might think," Marcus began carefully. "But I never met your husband, Mrs. Westbrook." "Eleanor," she corrected softly. "And I know it seems unlikely, but Charles spent those months working with veteran support organizations. He never told me details about that time, but when I saw you with Chloe..." She took a shaky breath. "The timing fits, and the resemblance, not just to Charles, but to Chloe herself. Your smile. The way you move." Marcus set the photo down gently. "Ma'am. Eleanor, I think you're seeing what you want to see. I was stationed in Vietnam until 75, then worked security jobs in Chicago for 20 years before moving here. I've never been involved with any veteran fundraising galas." "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Eleanor asked directly. "Just to be certain? I know it's a lot to ask, but..." She glanced down at her hands. "Chloe needs stability. She needs to know where she comes from." The weight of the request settled between them. Marcus thought of his own daughter, of all the questions children carry about their identity. He thought of Chloe's bright eyes and infectious laugh. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for money or position. I have a simple life, and I'm content with it." Eleanor's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Of course, I wouldn't expect." She straightened in her seat. "This isn't about money, Marcus. It's about Chloe." A young waitress approached their table, notepad ready. They both ordered toast for Eleanor, eggs, and bacon for Marcus. When she left, silence stretched between them. "There's something else you should know," Eleanor said finally. "Charles's death wasn't entirely natural. He had been struggling with depression, especially after discovering Chloe might not be." She swallowed hard. "I need to know the truth, for all our sakes." Marcus studied her face, seeing past the careful makeup to the worried mother beneath. "I understand wanting answers, but you need to be prepared. They might not be the answers you're hoping for." "I know." Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. "But Chloe adores you already, the way you helped her that day, with the bubbles." She smiled faintly. "Charles used to do that too. He always carried bubbles in his pocket for children at the Veterans Hospital." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine at the coincidence, but kept his voice steady. My late wife, Sarah, started that tradition. She was a kindergarten teacher. Their food arrived, steam rising from the plates. Neither made a move to eat. I'll set up the test, Eleanor said finally, discreetly, at a private clinic. No one needs to know until we have results. She pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal line. Please call me once you've decided. Marcus took the card, noting the heavy cream-colored stock, the embossed lettering. I'll let you know by tomorrow. They ate in silence, each lost in thought. When the check came, Eleanor reached for it automatically, but Marcus placed his hand firmly on the bill. Please, he said quietly, let me handle this small thing. Eleanor nodded, understanding the dignity behind his gesture. They rose together, and she extended her hand. Thank you for listening, Marcus. Whatever the results, I appreciate your willingness to hear me out. His large hand engulfed her smaller one. Take care of that little girl, Eleanor. She's special. Yes, Eleanor agreed softly. She certainly is. They parted at the door, heading in opposite directions under the morning sun. Marcus walked slowly back toward the school, his mind churning with possibilities he'd never imagined for his quiet life. Marcus's old pickup truck looked out of place among the luxury vehicles parked in the circular driveway of the Westbrook estate. He double-checked the address on his phone, though there was no mistaking the enormous white colonial mansion with its perfectly manicured lawns and towering columns. His work boots crunched on the gravel as he made his way to the front door, clutching a small paper bag. Inside was a fresh bottle of bubble solution, his peace offering of sorts. The door opened before he could knock, revealing a butler in a crisp black suit. Mr. Hayes, I presume? The man's tone was professional but neutral. Please, come in. Mrs. Westbrook is expecting you. Marcus stepped into an entrance hall that could have fit his entire apartment. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dancing across marble floors that reflected like mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, and the walls displayed oil paintings in ornate gold frames. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air from massive arrangements positioned on antique tables. Marcus! Chloe's voice echoed through the vast space. She came running down a sweeping staircase, her patent leather shoes clicking against the marble. Today, she wore a pale blue dress with a matching ribbon in her hair, looking every bit the daughter of privilege she was. Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs, elegant in cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse. Chloe, careful on the stairs, sweetheart. Her smile was warm but careful as she descended. Marcus, thank you for coming. Before anyone could say more, Chloe grabbed Marcus's hand. Come see my toys. I have so many things to show you. She tugged him toward a hallway, then stopped suddenly. Is it okay, Mommy? Eleanor nodded. Of course. Sarah brought up some lemonade and cookies to the playroom earlier. Marcus let Chloe lead him through the house, past more artwork and antiques that probably cost more than he'd earn in a lifetime. The little girl chattered excitedly about her day at school, her dance class, and her pet fish named Sparkles. The playroom was larger than Marcus's living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. Shelves lined the walls, filled with every toy imaginable. A child-sized table held art supplies, while a corner was dedicated to a miniature kitchen. What caught Marcus's attention was the enormous collection of Legos spread across a special table. Do you like Legos? Chloe asked, her eyes bright with hope. Marcus smiled, remembering countless hours spent building with his own daughter years ago. I sure do. Would you like to build something together? A castle, Chloe clapped her hands. With a dragon and knights and everything. They sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, sorting through colorful bricks. Marcus showed Chloe how to create stable walls, explaining in simple terms about foundations and support. She proved to be a quick learner, her small fingers working determinedly with the pieces. The dragon needs somewhere to sleep, Chloe declared, creating a small cave with dark gray pieces. That's clever thinking, Marcus praised. Every creature needs a home. As they worked, Marcus became aware of Eleanor's presence in the doorway. She stood watching them, one shoulder leaning against the frame. Her expression was hard to read, something between wonder and worry, as if she was seeing a puzzle piece that both fit and didn't fit at the same time. The castle grew steadily, incorporating Chloe's creative ideas with Marcus's practical knowledge. They added a drawbridge that really worked, tiny windows for the knights to peek out of, and even a garden made of different colored blocks. "Look, Mommy," Chloe called out proudly. "Marcus showed me how to make the towers super strong so they won't fall down." Eleanor stepped into the room, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. She knelt down beside them, careful not to wrinkle her expensive clothes. "It's wonderful, sweetheart. You two make quite the building team." Marcus noticed how her eyes lingered on his hands, working man's hands, with calluses and old scars, as they carefully helped Chloe attach a particularly tricky piece. The contrast between his weathered skin and the child's soft, pale fingers was stark. "Would you like to help us finish the flag tower, Mrs. Westbrook?" he offered, holding out a red triangular piece. Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes, surprise perhaps, or appreciation for the invitation. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the piece. "I'm afraid I was never very good at this sort of thing." "That's okay, Mommy," Chloe said earnestly. "Marcus can teach you too. He's really good at explaining things." A maid appeared silently with fresh lemonade and cookies arranged on a silver tray. Marcus watched as Eleanor automatically straightened her posture, the brief moment of informality fading. The staff member set everything down and disappeared as quietly as she had come. "Thank you, Sarah," Eleanor called after her, then turned back to the Legos. "Show me where this piece goes then." For the next hour, they worked together on the castle. Marcus couldn't help but notice how Eleanor gradually relaxed, her perfectly maintained facade softening as Chloe's enthusiasm pulled her into their project. She even laughed when a tower collapsed and had to be rebuilt. The sunlight shifted in the windows, casting long shadows across their creation. The castle stood nearly complete, a colorful testament to teamwork and imagination. Chloe had positioned little Lego figures throughout: knights, a princess, a wizard, and of course, the dragon. "Look," Chloe pointed to a figure she'd placed near the drawbridge. "That's you, Marcus. You're protecting everyone in the castle." Marcus caught Eleanor's sharp intake of breath at her daughter's words. When he glanced her way, she was watching them with that same conflicted expression, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Marcus's evening reflection. The key scraped in the lock of Marcus's modest one-bedroom apartment. Inside, the silence wrapped around him like an old blanket. Familiar, but not entirely comfortable. He flicked on the lamp beside his worn armchair, casting a warm glow across the living room's faded wallpaper. Dinner could wait. He headed straight for his bedroom closet, where a weathered cardboard shoebox sat on the top shelf. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled it down, carrying it with the reverence of someone handling precious memories. Settling into his armchair, Marcus lifted the lid. The musty scent of aged paper drifted up, along with decades of carefully preserved memories. On top lay his service photo, a younger version of himself in crisp military dress, standing proud and straight-backed. His eyes had been full of hope back then, before everything changed. "Look at us, thinking we had it all figured out," he murmured, setting the photo aside. Beneath it were dozens of letters, their creases worn soft from repeated reading. Some were from his late wife, Sarah, her handwriting flowing across the yellowed pages. Others bore official military letterheads. His hand paused over one particular envelope, its edges torn from the day he'd ripped it open in disbelief. The letter inside was typed, formal, devastating, accusations of theft from the supply depot where he'd worked as a logistics officer. $20,000 worth of medical supplies vanished on his watch. Marcus closed his eyes, the familiar anger rising in his chest. He'd spent weeks trying to prove his innocence, gathering evidence, calling in favors. But in the end, it hadn't mattered. The real culprits had covered their tracks too well, and Marcus had been the perfect scapegoat, a black officer who'd risen through the ranks too quickly for some people's comfort. "Lost my pension over a lie," he whispered to the empty room. The bitterness of that moment still tasted sharp, even after all these years. The discharge hadn't been dishonorable, but it hadn't been honorable either. Just a quiet pushing out, a career ended in shadows and whispers. More photos spilled from the box. His daughter Jessica's graduation, her smile bright and determined. Sarah's last Christmas, when the cancer had already taken her hair but couldn't touch her spirit. Each image told a story of loss and resilience, of keeping going when giving up would have been easier. A folded newspaper clipping caught his eye, the story about the missing supplies mysteriously turning up 6 months after his discharge, misplaced in another warehouse. By then it had been too late. The damage was done, his reputation stained, his future altered forever. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. The day's events with Chloe played through his mind like a movie reel. Her laughter as they built that Lego castle together, the way her small hands had carefully placed each brick. Her eyes, lighting up every time he suggested a new addition. A tower here, a drawbridge there. "What am I getting myself into?" he asked the photo of Sarah. Her smile offered no answers, but he could almost hear her voice. "You've always had room in your heart for more love, Marcus Hayes." The evening light faded outside his window as he sorted through more papers. His original enlistment papers, commendations from his early years, letters of recommendation from commanding officers who'd believed in him. Each document told part of the story of who he was, who he'd been before the accusation changed everything. Chloe's face kept appearing in his mind, overlaying the bitter memories. Her simple trust, so freely given, reminded him of how he used to be, before suspicion and hurt had built walls around his heart. The way she'd grabbed his hand today, completely unconcerned about the color of his skin or the calluses earned from years of manual labor. He picked up his phone, looking at the number Eleanor had given him. The DNA test would be simple enough, a cheek swab, a few weeks' wait. But was he ready for what it might reveal? Ready to potentially step into a world so different from his own? More importantly, was he ready to face disappointment again if it turned out to be another dead end? Marcus stood, stretching his stiff back. The shoebox of memories sat open on his coffee table, its contents spread out like chapters of his life. He began gathering the photos and letters, pausing over each one before returning it to its place. The military discharge papers went in last, their official letterhead a reminder of how quickly life could change. But when he reached for the box's lid, he hesitated. Instead of returning it to its shelf in the closet, he left it out. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd show Chloe some of the less painful photos, maybe the ones of him in his dress uniform or working on helicopters in Vietnam. She'd asked about his army days while they were building, and her curiosity had seemed genuine. The microwave hummed as he finally heated his dinner, a simple meal of leftover chicken and rice. He ate standing at his kitchen counter, looking out at the city lights beyond his window. Somewhere out there, in a mansion with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, a little girl might be telling her mother about the castle they'd built together. The thought made him smile, despite everything. Maybe Sarah had been right about his heart, having room for more love. Maybe it was time to stop letting old wounds dictate his future. He'd see Chloe again, he decided. Take the DNA test too. Whatever came next, he owed it to himself, and to that little girl with the bright eyes and ready smile, to at least try. The Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a welcome change from the week's dreary weather. Marcus stood at his bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his freshly pressed blue button-down shirt. He'd chosen it carefully, casual enough for the park but nice enough to show respect for the occasion. In his kitchen, he packed a small canvas bag with essentials, his trusted bottle of bubble solution, some bread for the ducks, and a few paper towels. His hands lingered on the bubble bottle, remembering how Sarah had given him his first one years ago, saying every kid deserved a little magic in their life. The drive to Eleanor's estate felt shorter than usual. Chloe burst through the front door before he could even ring the bell, her pink backpack bouncing as she ran down the steps. "Marcus, you came!" She wrapped her arms around his legs in a tight hug. "Of course I did, sweetheart." He patted her head gently. "Ready for our adventure?" Eleanor appeared in the doorway, elegant even in casual weekend wear. "Remember what we discussed, Chloe. Stay with Marcus at all times and listen to what he says." "Yes, Mommy." Chloe grabbed Marcus's hand, tugging him toward his car. The local park was just starting to fill with weekend visitors when they arrived. Sunlight sparkled off the pond's surface, and a light breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming dogwood trees. Marcus helped Chloe out of the car, her excitement infectious as she bounced on her toes. "Can we feed the ducks first?" "Please?" She clutched the bag of bread he'd handed her. "Lead the way, but remember, no running ahead." They walked along the pond's edge, Chloe chattering about her favorite ducks. "The brown ones are pretty, but I like the green heads best. Did you know they're called mallards?" "Is that right?" Marcus smiled at her knowledge. "Where did you learn that?" "From my science book. We're learning about birds at school." She tore off a piece of bread, tossing it toward a group of ducks that had noticed their approach. Marcus showed her how to break the bread into smaller pieces. "See, this way they all get some, and it's easier for them to eat." What neither Chloe nor Marcus noticed was Eleanor's arrival at the park shortly after them. She chose a bench partially hidden by a flowering bush, wearing sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. She told herself she was just being cautious, watching out for her daughter, but part of her knew she was curious about their interaction. The morning passed peacefully as Marcus and Chloe worked their way around the pond. He taught her about keeping a safe distance from the water's edge, and she taught him the duck facts she'd learned in school. When the bread was gone, Chloe looked up at him expectantly. "Bubbles now?" Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out the bottle. "First, let me show you the secret to the perfect bubble." They found a patch of grass near a wooden bench. Marcus knelt down to Chloe's level, holding the wand up to the sunlight. "The trick is to be gentle. You can't rush a good bubble." He demonstrated, moving the wand slowly through the air. A large, iridescent sphere formed and floated away, catching the light like a rainbow. Chloe's eyes widened in wonder. My turn, my turn." Marcus handed her the wand, guiding her small hands with his larger ones. "Easy now. Let the air do the work." On her third try, Chloe managed to create a perfect bubble that drifted up toward the trees. She jumped with joy, her laughter pure and uninhibited. It was then that an elderly couple walked past, settling on the nearby bench. The woman's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "Would you look at that? The help playing daddy. What is the world coming to?" Her companion responded with a disapproving grunt. Marcus's shoulders stiffened slightly, but his smile never wavered as he helped Chloe create another bubble. He'd heard worse over the years, learned to let it roll off his back like water. What mattered was the joy on Chloe's face as she chased her floating creations. From her hidden vantage point, Eleanor had heard the comment too. Her cheeks burned with shame, not just at the couple's prejudice, but at the recognition of similar thoughts she'd once harbored. She watched as Marcus continued teaching Chloe, his patience and gentleness unchanged by the cruel remarks. "Look, Marcus, I did it." Chloe's voice rang out as she successfully created a chain of bubbles. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You're a natural." His praise was genuine, his focus entirely on making this moment special for her. The elderly couple eventually left, but their words lingered in the air like an unpleasant odor. Eleanor noticed how Marcus subtly positioned himself between Chloe and any passing strangers, his protective instinct natural and unforced. He wasn't playing at being a father figure, he simply was one, titles and biology aside. The morning continued with more bubbles, a game of tag around a large oak tree, and finally, a rest on the grass where Marcus showed Chloe how to make daisy chains. His large hands proved surprisingly deft at the delicate task, and soon Chloe wore a crown of flowers, declaring herself Princess of the Park. A very fitting title, Marcus agreed, his eyes crinkling with warmth as she paraded around with her floral crown. The scene before Eleanor was so pure, so untainted by the social prejudices that had just been displayed, that she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She watched as her daughter, her precious Chloe, looked at Marcus with complete trust and affection, utterly unaware of the social boundaries others tried to impose. The sunset painted Marcus's modest apartment building in shades of amber and gold. He had just finished his simple dinner of baked chicken and vegetables when a knock at his door broke the evening quiet. Through the peephole, he saw Eleanor Westbrook standing in his hallway, looking somewhat out of place in her designer outfit against the worn carpet and faded wallpaper. Marcus opened the door, surprise evident on his face. "Mrs. Westbrook?" "Eleanor, please." She smiled tentatively. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." "No, not at all." He stepped back, gesturing for her to enter. "Please, come in." Eleanor crossed the threshold, taking in the small but immaculately kept apartment. The furniture was old but well-maintained, and everything had its place. A collection of framed photographs lined one wall, mostly of Marcus's grown daughter and his late wife. A worn army jacket hung carefully by the door. "Can I offer you some tea?" Marcus asked, his natural courtesy taking over despite his confusion at her presence. "Yes, thank you, that would be nice." While Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, Eleanor settled onto his comfortable but threadbare couch. Her eyes were drawn to a small side table where a familiar bubble bottle sat next to a photograph of a smiling woman. "That's Sarah, my late wife," Marcus said, returning with 2 steaming mugs. The bubbles were her idea. She used to say they were magic, could turn any tear into a smile. Eleanor accepted the tea with a quiet, "Thank you," and took a careful sip. "She sounds like she was a wonderful person." She was. Marcus sat in his worn armchair, his large frame making it seem smaller. "But I suspect you didn't come here tonight to talk about Sarah." "No," Eleanor admitted, setting her mug down. "I came because of what happened at the park today." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I was there, Marcus. I saw everything." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his shoulders tensed slightly. "I see. I heard what those people said," she continued, her voice tight with emotion. "And I saw how you handled it, with such grace and dignity. You never let it affect Chloe's experience." "Children shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult prejudices," Marcus replied simply. Eleanor nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since this morning. About Chloe, about you, about what's best for everyone involved." She met his eyes directly. "I want to move forward with the DNA test." Marcus sat back in his chair, his expression guarded. "I understand. But that's not all," Eleanor continued, leaning forward slightly. "Regardless of what the test shows, I want you to be part of Chloe's life." Marcus's eyebrows rose in surprise. "I'm not sure I follow." "Today, at the park, I watched you with her. The way you taught her, protected her, made her laugh." Eleanor's voice softened. "You have a gift with children, Marcus. And Chloe. She lights up around you in a way I haven't seen since Charles passed." She took another sip of tea, gathering her courage. "I'd like you to be a mentor to her, if nothing else. Someone she can look up to, learn from." A small smile touched her lips. "Someone who knows the magic of bubbles." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. His eyes drifted to Sarah's photograph. "It's not a simple thing you're proposing, Eleanor. There are complications." "I know," she acknowledged. "Your past in the military, the false accusations, the social differences between us. I understand all of that." She set her mug down firmly. "But I've seen how good you are with Chloe, how much she trusts you already. That matters more to me than any of those other things." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "And if the test comes back negative? If I'm not her father? Then you'll still be the man who turned her tears into laughter that first day in the hallway," Eleanor replied. "The man who taught her about kindness and patience today at the park." He turned back to face her, his expression thoughtful. And if it comes back positive, then we'll figure that out together, Eleanor said firmly. But either way, I want you in her life, if you're willing. Marcus returned to his chair, his movements deliberate. I need you to understand something, Eleanor. I won't be a casual presence in Chloe's life. If I agree to this, I'm all in. Children need consistency, stability. That's exactly what I'm hoping for, Eleanor nodded. We can schedule the test for later this week, but my offer stands regardless of the results. Marcus studied her face, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he slowly nodded. All right, we can do the test, but I have one condition. What's that? We don't tell Chloe about it until we have the results. I don't want to create any expectations or confusion for her. I agree completely, Eleanor said, relief evident in her voice. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This is the contact information for the medical center. They can do the test on Thursday if that works for you. Marcus took the card, his fingers brushing against hers briefly. Thursday is fine. I can go during my lunch break. Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. Thank you, Marcus, for considering this, for being so good with Chloe, for everything. Marcus walked her to the door, his movements carrying the same quiet dignity she'd observed at the park. Thank you for the trust you're placing in me. I won't take it lightly. As Eleanor stepped into the hallway, she turned back one last time. Chloe has soccer practice tomorrow after school. She'd love it if you came to watch. A small smile crossed Marcus's face. I'll be there. The morning sun cast long shadows across the clinic's waiting room as Marcus sat beside Chloe, who swung her legs back and forth on the oversized chair. Her sparkly purple sneakers caught the light with each kick. Eleanor stood at the reception desk, filling out paperwork with slightly trembling hands. And then Jenny brought her new puppy for show and tell. Chloe continued her story, seemingly oblivious to the tension around her. He's so tiny, Mr. Marcus, like this big. She held her hands about 6 inches apart. Marcus smiled, though his stomach felt like it was tied in knots. What kind of puppy is it? Chloe scrunched up her nose in concentration. A golden doodle. That's what Jenny said. He has curly fur and everything. Those are nice dogs, Marcus replied, his fingers absently tapping against his knee. He watched as Eleanor signed another form, her shoulders stiff beneath her cream-colored blazer. Can we get a puppy? Chloe asked, turning her big brown eyes toward him. Before Marcus could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Westbrook? She called out, clipboard in hand. Eleanor quickly finished signing and walked over to join them. That's us, she said, reaching for Chloe's hand. The nurse led them down a brightly lit hallway decorated with colorful cartoon animals. We'll do the swabs in here, she said, gesturing to a small examination room. It's very simple and won't hurt at all. Chloe climbed onto the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. What's a swab? It's like a special cotton stick, the nurse explained cheerfully, opening a sterile package. We're just going to rub it inside your cheek for a few seconds. It might tickle a little. Like when Mommy uses a Q-tip to clean my ears? Similar to that, sweetie, Eleanor said, standing close to the table. Marcus hung back near the door, feeling like an intruder in this intimate family moment. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back, a habit from his military days that always resurfaced when he felt nervous. Open wide like a lion, the nurse instructed Chloe, who immediately made an exaggerated roaring sound. Perfect. The swab was quick and painless, just as promised. Chloe giggled when it tickled her cheek. Your turn, Mr. Marcus, the nurse said kindly. Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware of Eleanor's eyes on him. He sat in the chair beside the examination table and opened his mouth. The swab felt strange against his cheek, but it was over in seconds. All done, the nurse announced, carefully labeling both samples. You were both very brave. Can I have a sticker? Chloe asked hopefully. The nurse laughed and pulled out a sheet of bright animal stickers. Of course. Which one would you like? While Chloe deliberated between a giraffe and an elephant, Eleanor spoke quietly with the nurse about when they could expect results. Marcus heard 7 to 10 business days and felt his heart skip a beat. "I picked the elephant," Chloe declared proudly, showing Marcus the sticker now adorning her shirt. "Do you want the giraffe, Mr. Marcus?" The simple innocence of her offer made his throat tight. "Thank you, sweetheart, but you keep both. You earned them." They made their way back to the parking lot, where Eleanor surprised him by asking, "Would you like to join us for lunch? There's a nice diner just around the corner." Marcus hesitated, but Chloe's excited, "Please, please, please," made it impossible to refuse. The diner was a cheerful place with red vinyl booths and chrome trim. A bell jingled as they entered, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. They settled into a booth, Chloe insisting on sitting next to Marcus. "Can I have pancakes?" she asked, studying the colorful menu with intense concentration. "For lunch?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "They serve breakfast all day," their waitress mentioned as she approached with water glasses. "And our pancakes are pretty famous around here." "Please?" Chloe drew out the word, clasping her hands together. Eleanor's stern expression softened. "All right, but you need to eat some fruit too. With extra syrup," Chloe added quickly, beaming. They placed their orders, pancakes with strawberries for Chloe, a club sandwich for Eleanor, and a bowl of vegetable soup for Marcus. While they waited, Chloe colored on her placemat with crayons provided by the waitress, humming softly to herself. "You're very good at staying in the lines," Marcus observed, watching her carefully color a cartoon penguin. "Mrs. Johnson says I'm the best colorer in class," Chloe said matter-of-factly, switching from blue to orange. "Want to help? You can do the fish." Marcus accepted a crayon, aware of Eleanor watching them with an unreadable expression. He began carefully coloring the fish, making sure to stay within the lines just as Chloe had done. Their food arrived, steam rising from the plates. Chloe's eyes widened at the sight of her pancakes, perfectly golden and topped with fresh strawberries. The waitress set down an extra side of syrup with a conspiratorial wink. "Remember to use your napkin," Eleanor reminded gently as Chloe eagerly reached for the syrup. Marcus watched as the little girl carefully poured syrup over her pancakes, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. A drop splashed onto the table, and without thinking, he quickly dabbed it with his napkin. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, broken only by Chloe's occasional happy humming and the clink of utensils. Marcus found himself stealing glances at both of them. Eleanor's graceful movements as she ate her sandwich, Chloe's determined efforts to cut her pancakes into perfect squares. "Would you like a taste?" Chloe suddenly offered, holding up a syrup-soaked piece of pancake on her fork. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, who gave a small nod. "Thank you, that's very kind of you," he said, accepting the bite. "Delicious." Chloe beamed with pride, then returned to her methodical demolition of the pancake stack. A smudge of syrup appeared on her cheek, and Marcus automatically reached for a napkin to wipe it away. The gesture felt so natural that it took him a moment to realize what he'd done. "Sorry," he said quickly, looking at Eleanor. But she just smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Don't be. You have good instincts." The rest of lunch passed pleasantly, with Chloe sharing more stories about school and her friends. When the check came, Eleanor insisted on paying despite Marcus's protests. The autumn wind rustled through the trees as Marcus examined the torn fabric of Chloe's kite. They sat together on a wooden bench in her backyard, the massive estate stretching out behind them. The diamond-shaped kite lay across their laps, its once bright yellow surface now sporting a jagged tear. "Can you fix it?" Chloe asked, her voice tinged with worry. She touched the rip gently with her small fingers. Marcus nodded, reaching for the repair kit he'd brought from home. "Sure can. Watch this." He pulled out some special tape and scissors, laying them on the bench beside him. "First, we need to line up the edges just right." Chloe leaned in close, her dark curls brushing against his arm as she watched him work. "Like a puzzle?" "Exactly like a puzzle." Marcus carefully aligned the torn edges. Now, we put this special tape on both sides, he demonstrated, smoothing the tape with practiced movements. Your kite will be stronger than ever. From the French doors leading to the garden, Eleanor watched them work together. She'd been on her way to a charity board meeting but found herself pausing, drawn to the scene before her. There was something about Marcus's patient manner, the way he explained each step to Chloe, that made her delay her departure. There we go, Marcus said, holding up the repaired kite. Want to test it out? Chloe bounced on her toes. Yes, please. Eleanor stepped forward, her heels clicking on the stone path. I have a few minutes before my meeting. Mind if I join you? Both Marcus and Chloe turned, surprised but pleased. Marcus stood, helping Chloe untangle the kite string. More the merrier, he said with a warm smile. They walked to the open part of the lawn, where Marcus showed Chloe how to hold the kite properly. Wait for the wind, he instructed, then run with it behind you. A gust picked up, and Chloe took off running, her laughter carrying across the yard. The kite caught the breeze and soared upward, dancing against the cloud-scattered sky. Eleanor found herself smiling, watching her daughter's joy. You're good with her, she said quietly to Marcus. He shrugged modestly. Kids just need someone to listen and care, that's all. The following week found them at the local library, where Marcus had suggested they start a reading routine. Chloe skipped between the shelves, picking out books while Marcus followed with a canvas bag. Look at this one, Chloe whispered excitedly, pulling out a book about space. It has pictures of all the planets. Marcus knelt beside her. That's a good choice. What else interests you? They spent an hour selecting books, ending up with a mix of science, adventure stories, and picture books about animals. As they checked out, the elderly librarian smiled at them. What a wonderful father-daughter afternoon, she remarked. Eleanor, who had decided to join them after finishing work early, felt a flutter of uncertainty at the comment. But watching Marcus help Chloe carefully place her library card back in her butterfly wallet, she realized she didn't mind the assumption as much as she might have expected. They decided to stop at a small cafe nearby, where Marcus introduced Chloe to his favorite winter tradition, hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows. Eleanor ordered a tea but found herself stealing sips of Chloe's drink when offered. Mom, look, Chloe giggled, showing off her marshmallow mustache. I look like Mr. Phillips from school. Eleanor laughed, reaching over with a napkin to wipe her daughter's face. She caught Marcus watching them with gentle amusement, his own cup cradled between his large hands. These moments began to multiply over the next few weeks. Marcus taught Chloe how to tie her shoes properly, using a special rhyme he'd made up. He helped her build a bird feeder for science class, showing her how to measure and sand the wood carefully. Each project came with stories, tales from his time in the service that always contained subtle lessons about perseverance, kindness, or doing what's right. Eleanor found herself rearranging her schedule to be present for these moments. She noticed how Chloe's vocabulary grew, peppered with new words Marcus taught her, how her daughter's natural curiosity bloomed under his encouragement. There was no agenda in his actions, no attempt to impress or manipulate, just genuine care and attention. One evening, as they sat on the patio watching Chloe attempt cartwheels on the lawn, Eleanor turned to Marcus. Thank you, she said simply. He looked at her questioningly. For being exactly what she needs right now, what we both needed perhaps. Eleanor smoothed her skirt, a gesture that betrayed her nervousness at such honesty. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Chloe tumble in the grass. She reminds me so much of my Sarah at that age, he said finally, referring to his grown daughter. Same spark, same big heart. Eleanor nodded, understanding what he didn't say, that this connection was healing something in him too. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Chloe ran over, grass stains on her knees, begging for another story. As Marcus began telling a tale about a brave little girl who helped a lost puppy find its way home, Eleanor watched her daughter's face light up with interest. She realized that somewhere along the way, her initial scheme had transformed into something genuine and precious, a bridge being built between three lonely hearts, one story, one fixed kite, one cup of hot chocolate at a time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek Elementary's front courtyard as Marcus finished his afternoon rounds. He just replaced some light bulbs in the gymnasium and was heading to check the parking lot for any stray trash before the after-school pickup began. The familiar sounds of children's voices and car doors filled the air as parents arrived to collect their kids. Marcus grabbed his trash pickup stick and bucket, moving methodically between the parked cars. He'd learned long ago that keeping busy helped him avoid awkward interactions with some of the more particular parents. "Mr. Hayes?" A woman's voice, crisp and practiced, called out behind him. Marcus turned to find Victoria Ashworth, one of the regular faces from Eleanor's social circle, standing there in an expensive cream-colored suit. Her pearl necklace caught the sunlight as she adjusted her designer purse strap. "Yes, ma'am?" Marcus straightened up, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the familiar twist in his stomach. He'd overheard enough of Victoria's whispered comments at school events to know exactly what she thought of him. Victoria's lips curved into what might have been meant as a smile, but looked more like she'd tasted something sour. "I wanted to." She paused, glancing around as if to make sure others were watching her charitable act. "Well, I wanted to apologize for any misunderstandings that may have occurred in the past." Marcus kept his face neutral, though his grip tightened slightly on the trash stick. "I'm not sure I follow, Mrs. Ashworth." "Oh, you know," she waved her manicured hand dismissively, "all that unfortunate gossip about your situation with Eleanor and little Chloe. I mean, it's really quite progressive of Eleanor to allow such an arrangement, don't you think?" The patronizing tone made Marcus's jaw clench, but years of practice helped him maintain his composure. "I appreciate your concern, ma'am, but he's my dad." A clear young voice rang out across the courtyard. Both adults turned to see Chloe marching toward them, her backpack bouncing with each determined step, her face set in a fierce expression that looked remarkably like Eleanor's when she meant business. Victoria's eyes widened. "Oh, sweetie, I know you've gotten attached, but no." Chloe planted herself firmly between Marcus and Victoria, her small hand reaching up to grab Marcus's work-worn fingers. "He's my dad. He fixes things when they're broken, and he reads me stories, and he makes the best hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and he always has bubbles in his pocket to make sad kids happy." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as Chloe squeezed his hand. Victoria's face flushed red. "Well, that's not exactly. Is everything all right here?" Eleanor's voice cut through the tension as she approached, her heels clicking purposefully on the pavement. She'd arrived just in time to hear Chloe's declaration, and her eyes held a mix of pride and protective fire as she surveyed the scene. "Eleanor," Victoria's voice jumped an octave, "I was just apologizing to Mr. Hayes here about any past misunderstandings." Eleanor raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Were you really, Victoria?" Her tone could have frozen summer itself, because it sounded more like condescension wrapped in a very thin veneer of civility. Victoria clutched her purse tighter. "I was only trying to what?" Eleanor stepped closer to Marcus and Chloe, forming a united front. "To make yourself feel better about months of spreading rumors? To demonstrate your supposed superiority? Let me be very clear. Marcus is family. How that came to be is no one's business but ours." Chloe nodded vigorously, still holding Marcus's hand. "And he's the best dad ever." Victoria's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a sickly pale. I should go. Brendan is waiting in the car." She turned and practically fled toward the parking lot, her heels catching awkwardly on the pavement in her haste. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, watching Victoria's retreat. Then Eleanor turned to Marcus, her eyes softening. I'm sorry about that. Victoria has always had a talent for making apologies sound like insults. Marcus shook his head, still processing what had just happened. It's okay, I'm used to. No, Eleanor cut him off firmly. It's not okay. And you shouldn't have to be used to it. She looked down at Chloe, who was now swinging Marcus's hand back and forth. Though it seems someone here knows exactly how to handle such situations. Chloe beamed up at them both. I just told the truth. Can we get ice cream? A chuckle escaped Marcus, breaking the last of the tension. Ice cream, huh? Please? Chloe turned her best puppy dog eyes on both adults. We can all go together. Eleanor checked her watch, then smiled. You know what? I think ice cream is exactly what we need right now. She reached down and took Chloe's other hand. Marcus, would you join us? Marcus looked at his bucket and trash stick, then at the two faces waiting expectantly. Let me just put these away and clock out. I'll meet you at the car. As he walked toward the maintenance shed, Marcus could hear Chloe chattering excitedly about what flavor she wanted to get. His heart felt fuller than it had in years, warmed by the fierce loyalty of a little girl who saw him not as the janitor, not as someone beneath her social class, but simply as her dad. The manila envelope sat unopened on Eleanor's kitchen island, its contents holding answers that could change everything. Marcus stood beside Eleanor, both of them staring at the simple paper package, as if it might suddenly spring to life. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble countertops. Should we? Eleanor's voice trailed off, her hand hovering over the envelope. Marcus nodded slowly. Better to know. With careful fingers, Eleanor broke the seal and pulled out the papers. Her eyes scanned the medical letterhead, moving down to the results section. Marcus watched her face, trying to read her expression, but years of business negotiations had given her an excellent poker face. She looked up at him, then wordlessly handed him the paper. Marcus's weathered hands trembled slightly as he read the words, Probability of paternity, 0%. The clinical language continued with scientific terms and percentages, but those first three words told him everything he needed to know. I'm not, he started, his voice rough. No, Eleanor said softly. You're not her biological father. Marcus set the paper down carefully, his movements deliberate as he processed the news. Part of him had known this would be the result. The timeline had never quite made sense, but another part had dared to hope. He thought of Chloe's bright smile, her trust in him, the way she defended him to Victoria just last week. What do we tell her? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor ran her fingers along the edge of the counter. The truth. She deserves that much. She paused, studying Marcus's face. But Marcus, this doesn't have to change anything if we don't want it to. Before he could respond, they heard the patter of small feet on the stairs. Chloe bounded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas decorated with cartoon astronauts, her curly hair wild from sleep. Good morning, she chirped, then stopped short when she saw their serious faces. Is everything okay? Marcus and Eleanor exchanged a look. Eleanor nodded slightly. Sweetheart, Marcus said, kneeling down to Chloe's level. Remember when we went to that doctor's office last week, and they took those special samples from our mouths? Chloe nodded. The cotton swab tickled. Yes, it did. Marcus smiled despite the heaviness in his chest. Well, those tests were to find out something important. Something about whether I could be your biological father. Chloe's forehead wrinkled in confusion. What's biological mean? Eleanor stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Chloe's shoulder. It means whether Marcus was the daddy who helped make you, honey. Oh. Chloe looked between them. And? Marcus took a deep breath. The test shows that I'm not your biological father, sweetheart. I'm not the daddy who helped make you. He waited for tears, for confusion, for the hurt he was sure would come. Instead, Chloe just shrugged her small shoulders and said, That's okay. You're still daddy. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. What? You're still my daddy, Chloe said matter-of-factly, as if explaining something very simple to someone who should already understand. You fix my toys and read me stories and make me feel better when I'm sad. That's what daddies do. Eleanor made a small sound, something between a laugh and a sob. Marcus felt moisture gathering in his eyes as Chloe stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck in a tight hug. Plus, she added, her voice muffled against his shoulder, you have the best bubbles. Marcus hugged her back, careful despite his emotions to be gentle. Over Chloe's head, he saw Eleanor watching them, her own eyes glistening. There was something uncertain in her expression, a shadow of worry about what this all meant going forward. Chloe pulled back from the hug and looked at Marcus seriously. Can we have pancakes? A laugh burst from Marcus's chest, releasing some of the tension that had built up. Pancakes, huh? With chocolate chips? Chloe added hopefully. Eleanor cleared her throat, quickly wiping her eyes. I think pancakes sound perfect. Why don't you go wash your hands while we get everything ready? As Chloe skipped out of the kitchen, Marcus slowly stood up, his knees protesting slightly. The weight of the moment settled back on his shoulders as he turned to Eleanor. She makes it sound so simple, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded, moving to get the pancake ingredients from the pantry. Children often do. But, she hesitated, measuring flour into a bowl. Marcus, we need to think about what this means. Legally, emotionally, practically. I know, he said, reaching for the mixing bowl to help. But maybe we can take a page from Chloe's book. Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated. Eleanor cracked an egg into the bowl, her movements precise despite her obvious distraction. The world isn't as simple as Chloe sees it. There will be questions, judgments. Like we haven't faced those already? Marcus smiled gently. Eleanor, I'm a black janitor who's somehow become part of a wealthy white family's life. We passed complicated a long time ago. A small smile tugged at Eleanor's lips. I suppose we did. She added milk to the mixture, stirring slowly. I want to do what's best for Chloe. What's taking so long? Chloe's voice rang out as she returned to the kitchen, her hands still slightly damp from washing. I'm starving. Just mixing the batter, sweetheart, Marcus said, reaching for the chocolate chips. Want to help add these? Chloe's face lit up as she climbed onto a stool at the counter. Eleanor watched as Marcus helped her measure out the chocolate chips, his large hands steady as they guided Chloe's smaller ones. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair, the laugh lines around his eyes as he smiled at something Chloe said. Maybe Chloe was right, Eleanor thought. Maybe the truth that mattered most wasn't written in DNA test results or legal documents, but in moments like these, in gentle hands teaching a little girl to make pancakes, in shared laughter on a sunny morning, in the simple, unwavering love of a child who knew exactly who her daddy was, regardless of biology. The uncertainty wasn't gone. There would be discussions to have, decisions to make, a future to figure out. But for now, there were pancakes to cook and chocolate chips to sprinkle, and sometimes that was enough. Greg Tanner drummed his fingers on his cluttered desk at the Daily Metro, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. The newsroom buzzed around him, but he barely noticed. After 20 years of chasing stories, he knew when he had something juicy. And this was grade A tabloid gold. Billionaire's daughter calls school janitor daddy, he muttered, scrolling through his notes. Now that's a headline. His desk was a mess of coffee-stained papers and sticky notes. 3 empty paper cups teetered precariously near his keyboard. A half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten beside them. Greg had been at this for hours, following every lead about Eleanor Westbrook and her daughter's unusual attachment to the school janitor. He clicked through public records, court documents, and social media posts. The story had started with a tip from his cousin's wife, who worked at Willow Creek Elementary. She'd mentioned the strange sight of Eleanor Westbrook, one of the city's wealthiest women, chatting with the school janitor like old friends. Marcus Hayes, Greg read aloud, pulling up the man's employment record. Vietnam vet turned school custodian. How very heartwarming. His tone dripped with sarcasm. The journalist leaned back in his creaky chair, running a hand through his thinning hair. At 45, he wasn't where he'd hoped to be in his career. The big stories kept going to younger reporters, leaving him scraping for whatever might sell papers. His editor had been dropping hints about budget cuts, and Greg knew his position wasn't secure. He needed this story. Bad. A few more keystrokes brought up military records. Greg's eyes widened as he spotted something interesting. Well, what do we have here? He squinted at the screen, reading carefully. Formal investigation, accusations of theft, pension disputed. A slow smile spread across his face. Bingo. Greg opened a new document and started typing. Scandal. Billionaire's child calls disgraced veteran daddy. Is this a con man's ultimate score? He paused, considering his words carefully. The actual military records were vague about the theft accusation, but Greg knew how to spin it. A few strategic word choices here, some carefully placed implications there. Sources close to the situation report that Marcus Hayes, a janitor at Willow Creek Elementary, has somehow managed to insert himself into the life of one of the city's most prominent families. Hayes, who lost his military pension under suspicious circumstances, has been seen spending time with billionaire philanthropist Eleanor Westbrook's young daughter. Greg's fingers flew across the keyboard. He knew exactly what his readers wanted. Scandal, intrigue, the hint of romance gone wrong. The fact that Hayes was black and Westbrook white? He wouldn't mention it directly, but he'd let his readers connect those dots themselves. He dug deeper into Hayes's background, finding old addresses, previous jobs, anything that might suggest a pattern of suspicious behavior. Most of what he found was mundane, steady employment, no criminal record, regular church attendance. But Greg knew how to make even the most innocent details sound sinister. Despite his humble position as a school janitor, Hayes has been spotted driving young Chloe Westbrook in a car, well above his apparent means, Greg typed, conveniently leaving out that the car belonged to Eleanor. Multiple sources confirm that Hayes has visited the Westbrook estate numerous times, raising questions about his true motives. He paused to answer a call from one of his regular tipsters, a security guard at the school who was always happy to share gossip for a few extra dollars. Yeah, they're together all the time, the guard confirmed. The kid absolutely adores him, but between you and me, some of the parents are pretty upset about it. Greg jotted down notes, his smile growing wider. Any chance you could get me some photos? Nothing too intrusive, just candid moments? The guard agreed, and Greg promised him double his usual fee. Turning back to his article, Greg crafted paragraphs designed to raise doubts and spark speculation. He carefully avoided making direct accusations. He knew exactly how far he could push without risking a libel suit. Questions remain about the nature of Hayes's relationship with the Westbrook family. While some sources suggest a potential biological connection, others point to a more calculated approach. He worked in quotes from anonymous sources, mostly bits of gossip he'd collected from the school's parent circle, rearranged to sound more dramatic. The military pension dispute became the cornerstone of his narrative, heavily implying that a man who'd lost his military benefits might be desperate enough to try anything. As Greg polished his final draft, he felt a familiar rush of excitement. This was the kind of story that could revive his career. Sure, it might hurt some people, but that's what sold papers. That's what kept journalists employed. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk, himself receiving a minor journalism award 15 years ago. Back then, he dreamed of Pulitzers and hard-hitting investigative pieces. Now, he dealt in gossip and scandal, but at least he was still in the game. Greg hit save and sat back, satisfied with his work. The article would run in tomorrow's paper, and he'd already arranged for digital teasers to go out tonight. By morning, Marcus Hayes and Eleanor Westbrook would be the talk of the city. Sometimes you've got to break a few eggs, he muttered to himself, reaching for his cold coffee. The newsroom had quieted as evening approached, but Greg wasn't done yet. He still needed to select the photos that would accompany the piece, innocent moments that could be made to look suspicious with the right captions. He clicked through several options. Marcus helping Chloe into Eleanor's car, the three of them at the park, Marcus and Chloe building something with Legos through the school's window. Each image told a story, and Greg knew exactly how to shape that story to match his narrative. The final draft sat ready on his screen, waiting to be sent to his editor. Greg gave it one last read-through, making sure every insinuation was carefully crafted, every accusation subtly implied rather than stated outright. It was the kind of article that would have people whispering at cocktail parties and school pickup lines. He hit send without hesitation. Tomorrow, Marcus Hayes's world would change, and Greg Tanner's byline would be the cause. He packed up his things, whistling as he headed for the elevator. It had been a good day's work. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, but the peace wouldn't last long. At newsstands across the city, the Daily Metro's bold headlines screamed for attention. From mop to millions, janitor's secret tie to Westbrook heiress. Eleanor Westbrook sat in her sunlit breakfast nook, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper. The story beneath the headline was worse than she'd imagined. Words jumped out at her. Mysterious past, military disgrace, questionable motives. Her coffee grew cold, untouched, beside a plate of untouched croissants. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since 7 a.m. Text messages, voicemails, and email notifications piled up by the minute. She'd already counted 15 missed calls from board members, and it wasn't even 9 o'clock. Ms. Westbrook? Maria, her housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Mr. Richardson from the board is on the landline. He says it's urgent. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Thank you, Maria. And please make sure Chloe doesn't see any newspapers today. She picked up the phone in her study, her shoulders straight, despite no one being there to see her. James, good morning. Eleanor, we have a situation. James Richardson's voice was tight with concern. Have you seen the article? I have. She kept her tone neutral, professional. The board is calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. This association with the janitor, it's causing serious concern among our investors. The foundation's reputation. His name is Marcus Hayes, Eleanor interrupted, surprising herself with the sharpness in her voice. Whatever his name is, Eleanor, this needs to be handled. The article suggests he's trying to manipulate his way into your fortune through Chloe. There are allegations about his military service. False allegations, she said firmly. That doesn't matter. James's voice rose. What matters is public perception. The Westbrook Foundation can't afford this kind of scandal. We need you to distance yourself and Chloe from this man immediately. Eleanor's phone buzzed again, another board member calling. She ignored it. James, I can't just... You have to think about the bigger picture. He cut in. Your father built this foundation from nothing. Thousands of people depend on our charitable work. Are you willing to risk all that for some janitor? The word hung in the air like something dirty. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of anger and shame. She glanced at a photo on her desk. Chloe at the park last week. Her face lit up with joy as Marcus showed her how to make giant bubbles. Her other phone kept buzzing. Texts from society friends poured in. Darling, what were you thinking? Do you need help? We can recommend an excellent PR firm. That man must be stopped before he ruins you. Eleanor's head pounded. She walked to the window, phone still pressed to her ear as James droned on about damage control. Outside, the garden that usually brought her peace looked somehow less vibrant. The roses she and Chloe had planted seemed to droop under the weight of this morning's news. The board meeting is at 2 p.m., James was saying. We'll need you to make a public statement distancing yourself from Hayes. Make it clear he has no connection to your family. Another call came through, this time from her mother. Eleanor could already imagine the conversation. Really, dear? A janitor? What would your father say? Eleanor? Are you listening? James demanded. Yes, she said quietly. "I'll be there at 2. She hung up and sank into her leather chair, the newspaper still mocking her from the desk. The article had dug deep, not just into Marcus's past, but into her life as well. It painted her as a naive widow, possibly being manipulated. It questioned her judgment, her parenting, her leadership of the foundation. Maria appeared again. "Ms. Westbrook? Miss Chloe is asking for her morning story time with Mr. Hayes." Eleanor's heart clenched. They had started this routine recently. Marcus would come over on Sunday mornings to read with Chloe. He had a way of making the stories come alive, complete with different voices for each character. Her phone buzzed yet again. The board's PR team this time, no doubt with a carefully crafted statement for her to read. "Tell Chloe." Eleanor paused, the words sticking in her throat. "Tell her Mr. Hayes can't make it today." Maria nodded and left, but not before Eleanor caught the flash of disappointment on her face. Alone in her study, Eleanor finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what was happening. The foundation her father had built, the legacy she'd worked so hard to protect, it all seemed to be crumbling because she'd let her guard down, because she'd seen something special in a kind man with a bottle of bubbles. The buzz of her phone pulled her back to reality. This time, it was a text from Marcus himself. "Saw the paper, don't worry about me, do what you need to do." Eleanor stared at those simple words, reading them over and over. Even now, he was thinking of her, trying to make things easier. She could hear Chloe's voice from upstairs, probably asking Maria why Marcus wasn't coming for story time. Her phones kept ringing, emails kept arriving, and the newspaper's harsh headlines seemed to grow bigger on her desk. In a few hours, she would have to face the board and make a decision that would affect not just her life, but Chloe's as well. The morning stretched on, each minute marked by another call, another message, another reminder that her carefully controlled world was spinning out of control. Through the window, she could see her neighbors hurrying past, some clutching copies of the Daily Metro, others speaking in hushed tones as they glanced at her house. Eleanor picked up the newspaper again, forcing herself to read every word of the article that was threatening to tear apart the fragile happiness she and Chloe had found. The writer, Greg Tanner, had painted Marcus as a calculated opportunist, twisting every innocent interaction into something sinister. The photo they'd used showed Marcus in his janitor's uniform, caught mid-motion as he mopped the school hallway. They'd made sure to capture him looking down, his expression serious, rather than the gentle smile she'd come to know. "Mommy?" Chloe's voice came from the doorway. "Why isn't Marcus coming today?" Eleanor quickly folded the newspaper, hiding it under some papers. "He's busy today, sweetheart." "But it's story time," Chloe said, her lower lip trembling slightly. "He promised to finish Charlotte's Web." Before Eleanor could respond, her phone rang again. The screen showed Board of Directors. The time read 1:30 p.m. The emergency meeting was approaching, and they were calling to make sure she would deliver their carefully scripted denouncement of Marcus Hayes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Eleanor paced near the old oak tree. She'd chosen this spot carefully, secluded enough for privacy, but public enough to avoid raising more eyebrows. Her heels sank slightly into the damp grass with each step. Marcus arrived exactly on time, wearing his familiar work jacket despite the mild weather. His face was drawn, tired. He'd seen the papers too. She could tell by the way his shoulders hunched forward, as if carrying an invisible weight. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said, her voice softer than she'd intended. Marcus nodded, remaining standing even when Eleanor gestured to the nearby bench. "I saw the article," he said simply. "It's awful, Marcus. Completely unfair." Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she rarely allowed in public. The journalist twisted everything, made implications that are completely false. "Nothing new there," Marcus said, his voice carrying a weight of years of similar experiences, been through worse. Eleanor felt the sting of his quiet dignity. Here was a man who'd faced prejudice his whole life, and now she was about to add to that burden. She took a deep breath. The board of directors called an emergency meeting this morning. She began, hating how formal her voice sounded. They're concerned about the foundation's reputation. Our donors are asking questions. Marcus's face remained carefully neutral. I understand. No, you don't, Eleanor said quickly. This isn't what I want, but the foundation helps thousands of children. We can't risk losing our funding, our ability to do good work. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. A jogger passed by, and they both fell silent until he was out of earshot. The park's peaceful atmosphere felt like a cruel contrast to the conversation. They want me to distance myself, distance Chloe, from you. Just temporarily, Eleanor added hastily, seeing the pain flash across Marcus's face. Just until this dies down, and we can clear up the misconceptions about your military service. Marcus turned slightly, looking out across the park where children played on distant swings. Chloe's going to ask questions. I know. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. I'll explain it to her. She's young, but she's smart. She'll understand it's not forever. Will she? Marcus's question hung in the air between them. 6-year-olds don't understand temporary. They just understand who's there and who isn't. Eleanor felt tears threatening and blinked them back. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to go. The DNA test was supposed to provide clarity, not chaos. Instead, it had opened a door for people's worst assumptions and prejudices. I never meant for any of this to happen, she said quietly. When I saw you that first day with the bubbles, how gentle you were with her. She trailed off, remembering the moment that had started everything. Marcus finally sat down on the bench, his movements heavy. I should have known better. A man like me, getting involved with a family like yours, people were bound to talk. That's not fair, Eleanor protested. You're a good man, Marcus, the best father figure Chloe could ask for. These people in my world, their opinions shouldn't matter. But they do, Marcus said simply. They matter because they control your foundation's purse strings. They matter because their children go to school with Chloe. They matter because that's the world she lives in. Eleanor sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. Give me time to fix this. My PR team is already working on a response. We can prove those military accusations were false. Marcus stood up, adjusting his jacket. No need. I'll make it easy for everyone. I'll transfer to another school district. Marcus, please. It's better this way, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Chloe doesn't need to see me being torn down in the papers. Doesn't need to hear whispers about her janitor daddy in the schoolyard. Eleanor stood too, reaching for his arm but stopping short of touching him. At least say goodbye to her. Marcus shook his head, and for the first time, Eleanor saw tears in his eyes. Can't do that. She'd try to convince me to stay, and I might not be strong enough to say no. Better to make a clean break. She'll be heartbroken, Eleanor whispered. Yes, Marcus agreed, already turning to leave. But she has you, and she'll bounce back. Children do. Eleanor watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller against the lengthening shadows. She stood there long after he'd disappeared from view, the weight of what she'd done settling heavy on her shoulders. That evening, Chloe sat at the dinner table, pushing her food around her plate. When is Marcus coming to read me a story? Eleanor set down her fork, her appetite gone. Sweetheart Marcus, he won't be coming for a while. Chloe's lower lip trembled. But why? Did I do something wrong? No, darling. You didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions. Marcus needs to take care of some things. But he's my daddy now, Chloe insisted, her voice rising. He promised to teach me how to ride my bike without training wheels. Eleanor felt her heart breaking. I know, sweetheart. I know he did. Chloe pushed away from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I hate you, she shouted, running from the room. You made him go away. Eleanor followed her daughter upstairs, listening to the sobs coming from behind the closed bedroom door. She sat outside, her back against the wall, as Chloe's crying continued into the night. Eventually, the sobs quieted to hiccups, then to the steady breathing of exhausted sleep. Only then did Eleanor allow her own tears to fall, sitting alone in the darkened hallway, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Marcus's apartment felt emptier than usual as he clicked through channels on his old TV. The blue light flickered across his face in the darkness, casting strange shadows on the walls. A half-eaten container of yesterday's Chinese takeout sat on the coffee table, gone cold hours ago. His eyes drifted to the small plastic bubble bottle perched on the shelf, gathering dust next to his wife's photograph. He'd moved it there 3 days ago, unable to carry it in his pocket anymore. Every time he touched it, he remembered Chloe's laughter, the way her whole face would light up when the bubbles caught the sunlight. The late-night news droned on about stock markets and weather patterns. Marcus barely heard it. His daily routine had shrunk back to what it was before. Wake up, work, come home, sleep. Simple. Quiet. Lonely. At work, he took the long way around when mopping the halls near Chloe's classroom. The other janitors had offered to swap sections with him, their faces full of awkward sympathy. He declined. A man faced his troubles head-on, that's what his father had always said. The microwave hummed as he reheated another container of leftovers. He couldn't remember when he'd cooked it. The days had started blending together, marked only by the steady rhythm of his mop against tile floors and the weight of unsaid words. Some nights, he found himself talking to Sarah's picture, just like he used to. "You'd have known what to do," he whispered to his late wife's smile. "You always did." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. At Willow Creek Elementary, Chloe sat at her desk, chin propped on her hand, watching raindrops race down the classroom window. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had called on her twice already, but Chloe's mind was elsewhere. "Chloe?" Mrs. Patterson tried again, gentler this time. "Would you like to share your answer?" Chloe shook her head, shrinking lower in her seat. The math problem on the board blurred through unshed tears. When recess came, she didn't join the usual rush to the playground. Instead, she lingered by the window, watching other kids chase each other through puddles. Her best friend Jenny tried to coax her outside, but Chloe just shrugged. "Want to play hopscotch?" Jenny asked, tugging at Chloe's sleeve. "No thanks," Chloe mumbled, her eyes fixed on the empty hallway where she used to see Marcus pushing his cart, always ready with a smile and sometimes, if she was lucky, a few magical bubbles. The teachers exchanged worried glances. They'd seen this change in her, the missing smiles, the quiet withdrawal, the way she avoided the halls where Marcus used to work. During art class, she drew picture after picture of 3 people holding hands: a tall man in green, a little girl, and a woman in high heels. She never colored them in anymore. Eleanor sat in her home office, staring at quarterly reports without really seeing them. The house felt different now, emptier somehow, despite the staff moving quietly through their duties. She could hear Chloe upstairs, supposedly doing homework, but the usual happy humming was absent. The foundation's numbers looked good on paper. Donations had stabilized after the article, their reputation intact. Everything was back to normal, exactly as the board had wanted. So why did victory feel so hollow? Mrs. Chen, Chloe's nanny, appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Westbrook?" "Chloe hasn't touched her dinner again." Eleanor rubbed her temples. "Did she at least eat the mac and cheese?" "She said she's not hungry." Mrs. Chen hesitated. "She keeps asking about Mr. Hayes." The guilt that had been gnawing at Eleanor's conscience grew sharper. She thought of the board meeting, how easily they dismissed Marcus as a PR problem to be solved. None of them had seen him teaching Chloe to tie her shoes, or the way he listened to her stories as if they were the most important things in the world. Later that night, Eleanor found herself in Chloe's room, watching her daughter sleep. The stuffed giraffe Marcus had fixed, the one with the wobbly neck that no one else could repair, was clutched tightly in her arms. On her bedside table, a small bottle of bubble solution sat untouched, a gift from Marcus she refused to use without him. Eleanor picked up the bottle, turning it over in her hands. The label was worn from frequent handling, the solution inside still full. She remembered watching from her car as Marcus and Chloe chased Bubbles across the park, their laughter carrying on the wind. How long had it been since she'd heard Chloe laugh like that? The Foundation's mission statement hung in her office downstairs. Creating better futures for children through compassion and understanding. The irony wasn't lost on her. In protecting the Foundation's ability to help other children, had she damaged her own? She set the bubble bottle down carefully and brushed a strand of hair from Chloe's forehead. In sleep, her daughter's face still showed traces of sadness. A slight furrow between her brows, dried tears on her cheeks. Eleanor's carefully constructed world of galas and board meetings suddenly seemed very small compared to the simple joy of Bubbles dancing in sunlight. Mrs. Chen's daily report sat on Eleanor's desk. Didn't finish lunch. Skipped afternoon snack. Asked to stay inside during playground time. Drew another picture of her family, but wouldn't show it to anyone. Each note was another crack in Eleanor's certainty. Another whisper that maybe the board's definition of right didn't align with what was right for Chloe. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, but Eleanor remained awake, watching the moonlight paint shadows across her daughter's room. Somewhere across town, she knew Marcus was probably awake too, maybe watching late-night TV in his empty apartment, or looking at old photographs, or trying to forget the sound of Chloe calling him Daddy with such pure, unquestioning love. The weight of her decision pressed heavier with each passing day. The Foundation's reputation was secure, but at what cost? Every morning, she watched Chloe pick at her breakfast, shoulders slumped, eyes dull. Every afternoon, she received another note from school about her daughter's increasing withdrawal. Every night, she heard Chloe's muffled sobs through the bedroom wall. The sharp rap on Marcus's apartment door came just after 8 in the evening. He wasn't expecting anyone, and these days, unexpected visitors usually meant more bad news. Through the peephole, he saw a familiar broad-shouldered figure shifting impatiently in the dim hallway light. "Open up, Hayes. I know you're in there." The booming voice belonged to Raymond Carter, and it carried the same commanding tone it had back in their army days. Marcus undid the chain and opened the door. Ray stood there in his worn leather jacket, a folded newspaper tucked under one arm, his salt and pepper hair shorter than the last time they'd met. 2 years without a word, and now you show up on my doorstep, Marcus said, but there was no real anger in his voice. He stepped aside to let his old friend in. Ray strode into the small living room, taking in the quiet disorder, the unwashed coffee cups, the stack of unopened mail, the TV droning in the background. Saw this garbage in the paper. He tossed the tabloid onto the coffee table. Marcus's face stared back from the grainy photo, next to a much larger picture of Eleanor and Chloe. Had to drive 4 hours to make sure you weren't doing anything stupid. Marcus sank into his armchair, suddenly tired. Nothing to do, Ray. Story's already out there. Bull. Ray paced the room, his heavy footsteps making the floorboards creak. That's the same defeated talk I heard 20 years ago when they railroaded you out of your pension. Not this time, brother. Not again. Marcus rubbed his eyes. It's different now. There's a little girl involved. Yeah, I read about her too. Ray's voice softened. Sounds like you really care about this kid. Doesn't matter anymore. Her mother made it clear. Staying away is what's best for everyone. Ray stopped pacing and planted himself directly in front of Marcus. Best for who? That little girl who loves you? Her mother who's letting fear call the shots? Or you, hiding in here feeling sorry for yourself? Marcus stood up, anger finally flickering in his eyes. You don't understand. Eleanor's got her reputation to protect, her company's board breathing down her neck. And Chloe, she doesn't need to see my name dragged through the mud again. Listen to me, Ray said, gripping Marcus's shoulder. I've got a contact, retired JAG officer named Collins. He owes me a favor from way back. He's been itching to reopen cases like yours, soldiers who got screwed by the system. Marcus shook his head. That was 20 years ago, Ray. And the truth is still the truth. Ray's voice rose. Remember Martinez, the supply sergeant who actually did the stealing? He confessed 10 years ago on his deathbed. Collins has the documentation. We can prove it was never you. Marcus walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. The weight of old injustices pressed down on his shoulders. Even if we could clear my name, that journalist, he'll just dig up something else. People like that, they don't care about the truth. People like that count on good men staying quiet. Ray countered. Remember what you always told the new recruits. Standing up isn't about winning, it's about showing others it can be done. Marcus turned, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. You actually listened to my speeches? Every damn one, Ray grinned, even the boring ones about proper boot maintenance. The moment of levity passed, and Ray's face grew serious again. Collins is ready to move on this. One phone call, that's all it takes. But you have to want it, Marcus. You have to be willing to fight. Marcus picked up the bubble bottle from the shelf, turning it over in his hands. I'm tired of fighting, Ray. Been doing it my whole life. Then do it for her. Ray nodded at the bottle. Do it for that little girl who sees you as her daddy, regardless of what some DNA test says. Show her what it means to stand up against lies. Marcus sat heavily on the couch, the bubble bottle still in his hands. The memory of Chloe's tear-streaked face the last time he'd seen her at school cut through him like a knife. What if we lose? What if we win? Ray countered. He pulled out his phone and held it up. Collins is expecting my call. What do you say, brother? Ready to set things right? Marcus stared at the phone for a long moment. 20 years of carrying that false accusation, of explaining away the loss of his pension, of seeing doubt in people's eyes when they heard the story. And now Chloe, somewhere across town, probably wondering why her daddy had abandoned her. Make the call, Marcus said quietly, then with more strength. Make the call, Ray. Ray's face split into a wide grin as he punched in the number. Collins? Yeah, it's Carter. I'm with Hayes right now. He's ready. He listened for a moment, then handed the phone to Marcus. He wants to hear it from you. Marcus took the phone, his hand steady now. This is Marcus Hayes, he said into the receiver. I hear you might be able to help me clear my name. As he listened to Collins outline the first steps, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Not just for himself, but for the chance to show Chloe that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones most worth fighting. Ray watched his friend's face change as he talked with Collins, seeing the old soldier straighten his shoulders, watching the spark return to his eyes. He smiled to himself, knowing that the Marcus Hayes he remembered, the one who never backed down from a fight when justice was on the line, was finally coming back. Sit down, Marcus, Ray said, his voice softening as he settled onto the worn couch. We're fixing this mess whether you want to or not. Marcus sank into his favorite armchair, exhaustion written across his face. Ray, I appreciate you coming, but nothing. Ray pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. I've already talked to Johnson. You remember him? Made lieutenant colonel before retiring, works with the JAG Corps now. He's willing to look at your case. Marcus rubbed his temples. That was 20 years ago, Ray. What good would it do now? 20 years of injustice is 20 years too many. Ray leaned forward, his eyes intense. Look, I've got contacts. People who were there, people who knew the truth but were too scared to speak up back then. They're ready to talk now. Over the next few days, Ray was like a force of nature. He made calls from Marcus's kitchen table, sent emails from his ancient laptop, and drove across 3 counties tracking down former servicemen who had been stationed with them. First came Staff Sergeant Miller's statement, delivered by certified mail. The elderly veteran's handwriting was shaky but clear as he detailed how the missing equipment had actually been sold by Lieutenant Parker, who had tried to pin the blame on Marcus. See? Ray said triumphantly, waving the paper. Miller was too sick to testify back then, but he's been carrying this guilt all these years. Now he wants to make it right. Then came Rodriguez, their old supply officer, with documentation he'd kept hidden in his attic, requisition forms, with forged signatures that proved Marcus couldn't have been responsible for the theft. Marcus watched it all with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Why are they coming forward now? Because they're older now, Ray explained, sorting through a growing stack of papers. Retirement has a way of making men face their consciences. Plus, nobody's afraid of Parker anymore. He passed away last spring. The breakthrough came when Johnson, true to Ray's word, took an interest in the case. The former JAG officer spent a week reviewing the new evidence, then made a series of calls to his old colleagues in Washington. The military takes false accusations seriously, Johnson explained during a conference call, his voice crackling through Ray's phone speaker. Especially when they've cost a good soldier his pension. With these statements and the paper trail we've uncovered, we can file for a formal review. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, listening as Ray and Johnson discussed legal terms and procedures. 20 years of bitterness had left him wary of hope, but he couldn't deny the growing stack of evidence supporting his innocence. One morning, Ray burst into Marcus's apartment waving a local newspaper. Not the tabloid that had smeared him, but the Valley Herald, a small but respected publication. They're running the story, Ray announced, spreading the paper on the table. Front page, below the fold. Marcus stared at the headline. Veteran seeks justice. New evidence challenges decades. Old military conviction. The article was thorough, detailing the original accusation, the new evidence, and Marcus's years of quiet service to the community as a school janitor. This is just the beginning, Ray said, pulling out his phone to show Marcus the online version. People are already sharing it. The bigger papers will pick it up soon. The story gained traction in veterans groups first. Letters of support began arriving at the Valley Herald, many from former service members who had experienced similar injustices. Some local veterans even organized a small rally outside the courthouse, demanding the military review Marcus's case. It's happening, buddy, Ray said one evening as they sat reviewing another batch of notarized statements. The truth's finally coming out. Marcus nodded slowly, touching the worn edges of his old military photo. I just wanted to clear my name, he said quietly. Never thought it would take all this. Sometimes it takes an army, Ray replied with a slight smile. Good thing you've got one on your side. Within 3 weeks of Ray's arrival, they had assembled a formidable case, 17 sworn affidavits, original documentation proving Lieutenant Parker's guilt, and statements from 3 retired JAG officers supporting Marcus's claim of innocence. The Valley Herald ran a follow-up story, this one featuring interviews with Marcus's former colleagues and current co-workers at Willow Creek Elementary. The article painted a portrait of a man who had faced injustice with dignity, never letting bitterness stop him from serving others. Your story's changing minds, Ray said one morning, showing Marcus the growing number of supportive comments on the newspaper's website. People are starting to see the truth. Marcus stood at his apartment window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope. For the first time in 20 years, the weight of that old accusation felt lighter. He thought of Chloe, wondering if she might someday know the whole truth about why he had stepped away, not because of any guilt, but because he had learned the hard way how cruel false accusations could be. Ray appeared beside him, coffee cup in hand. The Military Review Board meets next week, he said. Johnson says it's looking good, real good. Marcus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Thank you, Ray, for not letting this go. Hey, Ray clapped him on the shoulder. That's what brothers are for. Now, let's go over those statements one more time. We're going to make sure every word is perfect. The Grand Wellington Hotel sparkled like a jewel box, its crystal chandeliers casting warm light over marble floors and gilded walls. Eleanor stood at the podium in an elegant black evening gown, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd of philanthropists and donors gathered for her annual children's charity gala. Every child deserves a champion, she said, her fingers gripping the edge of the wooden lectern. Someone who sees their potential, nurtures their dreams, and stands beside them through life's storms. At a corner table near the back, Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his borrowed tuxedo. Ray had practically dragged him here, insisting he needed to be present. "You clean up nice," Ray had said earlier, adjusting Marcus's bow tie. "Now, stop fidgeting like a recruit at inspection." The ballroom glittered with wealth, designer gowns, diamond necklaces, platinum watches catching the light. Marcus felt out of place, despite Ray's reassurances. He watched Eleanor on stage, noticing how she'd pause between sentences, her usual confidence somewhat dimmed. Near the front of the room, Chloe sat at a table with her nanny, wearing a tiny lavender dress that made her look like a spring flower. She hadn't seen Marcus yet. Ray had made sure they arrived after the dinner service, slipping in quietly during the speeches. "The past year has taught me much about prejudice," Eleanor continued, her voice taking on a more personal tone. "About how we sometimes let society's expectations blind us to what truly matters." Marcus noticed Chloe fidgeting in her seat, clearly bored by the grown-up talk. She twisted around, scanning the crowd as her nanny whispered something in her ear. Then suddenly, her eyes locked with his. The change in her expression was instant, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Her whole face lit up with joy and disbelief. "Daddy!" she mouthed silently, starting to rise from her chair. The nanny grabbed her arm gently, but Chloe was already wriggling free. Marcus felt his heart leap into his throat as she darted between the tables, her lavender dress floating behind her like wings. Eleanor was mid-sentence about donation goals when Chloe reached the stage. "And with your generous support, we can expand our after-school programs too." "Daddy!" Chloe's voice rang out through the ballroom as she scrambled up the steps. She launched herself at Marcus, who had instinctively moved forward when he saw her running. He caught her in his arms, muscle memory from their park days taking over. The microphone picked up everything. Chloe's voice echoed through the sound system as she threw her arms around Marcus's neck. "This is my dad," she announced proudly to the stunned crowd. "He makes the best bubbles in the whole world." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Phones appeared, capturing the moment. Eleanor stood frozen at the podium, her prepared speech forgotten as she watched her daughter cling to Marcus with pure, uncomplicated love. Marcus held Chloe close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. He'd missed her, more than he'd allowed himself to admit. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly on the lectern. The crowd waited, breath held, to see how she would handle this disruption. Several board members at the front table looked alarmed, already reaching for their phones. But then, Eleanor did something that surprised everyone. She smiled. A real smile. Not her practiced social one. She stepped away from the podium and walked to where Marcus stood holding Chloe. "You know what?" she said into the microphone, her voice clear and determined. "My daughter is right. This is her father, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the kind of character that can't be measured in bank accounts or social status." She turned to face the crowd directly. "Marcus Hayes is a decorated veteran who was wrongly accused and has recently been cleared of all charges. He's a man who carries bubble solution in his pocket because he knows sometimes children need magic more than they need lectures. He's the kind of father I want for my daughter. Someone who teaches her that kindness matters more than wealth, that integrity isn't measured by your zip code." Chloe beamed, still hanging onto Marcus's neck. "Can you blow bubbles now?" she whispered, making several people in the audience chuckle. Marcus reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out the small bottle. He'd started carrying it again, more out of habit than hope. The simple gesture brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she continued, her voice stronger now, "this is what our charity is truly about. Not just writing checks, but recognizing that love and support can come from unexpected places. That sometimes the most valuable thing we can give a child is simply being there, showing up, making them feel safe and cherished." As if to demonstrate her point, Chloe wiggled in Marcus's arms until he set her down. She immediately grabbed both his hand and Eleanor's, pulling them together. They stood there on stage, the billionaire philanthropist, the school janitor, and the little girl who saw no contradiction in loving them both. The silence in the ballroom broke. Someone started clapping. Later, Ray would claim it was him, and soon the entire room joined in. The applause grew, swelling into a standing ovation that had nothing to do with charitable donations and everything to do with the simple truth of what they were witnessing. Chloe tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Blow bubbles, Daddy, please." Marcus looked at Eleanor, who nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He uncapped the bottle, dipped the wand, and sent a stream of iridescent bubbles floating over the heads of New York's elite. Chloe's delighted laugh echoed through the microphone as she chased them, her lavender dress swirling. Suddenly, Chloe's small form darted from her seat, her lavender dress floating behind her like butterfly wings. "Daddy!" Her voice rang clear through the ballroom as she raced toward Marcus, tears streaming down her cheeks. The crowd collectively gasped. Forks clattered against china plates. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through tall grass. Marcus instinctively knelt, catching Chloe as she flew into his arms, her tiny fingers clutching his tuxedo lapels. "I missed you so much," she sobbed into his shoulder, her words muffled but clear enough to carry in the stunned silence. Eleanor stood frozen at the podium, her prepared speech forgotten. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched her daughter cling to Marcus, his large frame gentle and protective as he held her. The sight struck something deep within her, a truth she'd been fighting against, wrapped up in appearances and expectations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor said, her voice wavering before finding its strength. She stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way through the maze of white-clothed tables. "I'd like you all to meet someone very special." The room remained absolutely still, hundreds of eyes following Eleanor's path toward Marcus and Chloe. Ray stood nearby, a proud smile on his weathered face as he watched his friend's vindication unfold. Eleanor reached them, her hand coming to rest on Chloe's back. Marcus started to rise, but she gestured for him to stay as he was. Instead, she knelt beside them, her expensive gown pooling around her on the floor. In that moment, the distinction between their worlds seemed to dissolve. "This is Marcus Hayes," Eleanor announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed ballroom. "Many of you may have read about him in the papers recently. Those stories got a lot wrong, but they did get one thing right. He is part of our family." Marcus looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. Chloe's arms tightened around his neck. "You see," Eleanor continued, rising to address the crowd properly, though she kept one hand on Marcus's shoulder, "I've spent my life believing family was about bloodlines and birth certificates, about maintaining an image and meeting society's expectations." She paused, drawing a deep breath. "I was wrong." The silence in the room grew deeper, more attentive. Even the serving staff had stopped to listen. "Family." Eleanor's voice grew stronger, more certain with each word. "Is not just about blood. It's about love. It's about honor. It's about showing up, day after day, with an open heart and steady hands." She smiled down at Marcus and Chloe. "It's about someone who carries bubble soap in his pocket because he knows it might help a crying child smile. Someone who teaches patience through building Lego castles and courage through fixing broken kites." Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes, but she blinked them back, standing tall. "Some of you have questioned my judgment in allowing Marcus into our lives. You've whispered about propriety and position. Well, tonight I'm not just allowing it, I'm celebrating it." She squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus Hayes is going to be a permanent part of Chloe's life. He'll be her guardian, alongside me, because that's what family does. They stand together. Not because of blood, but because of love." The room remained silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere near the back, applause started. It was Ray, standing at his table, clapping with the same conviction he'd shown in defending his friend's honor. The applause spread slowly at first, then faster, building into a wave of support that filled the grand ballroom. Marcus stood slowly, still holding Chloe, who had no intention of letting go. Eleanor moved closer, completing their small circle amidst the applauding crowd. For the first time in weeks, they stood together without shadows between them, without worry about what others might think or say. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered, just loud enough for Marcus to hear over the applause. "I should have done this sooner." Marcus shook his head, his eyes warm with understanding. "You did it when it mattered most," he replied softly. Chloe lifted her head from Marcus's shoulder, her face streaked with tears but beaming. "Does this mean you're staying forever, Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart," Eleanor answered before Marcus could speak. "He's staying forever." The applause continued around them, but in that moment they were in their own world. A family formed not by circumstance or biology, but by choice and love. Eleanor reached out and took Marcus's free hand, squeezing it gently. A gesture that spoke volumes about trust rebuilt and barriers broken down. The crowd's reaction began to shift from mere applause to active support. Several of Eleanor's board members approached, offering handshakes and warm words to Marcus. Even some of those who had once whispered behind their hands now came forward with genuine smiles and congratulations. Through it all, Marcus stood tall, his dignity and grace unmistakable in his pressed tuxedo. He was no longer the janitor at the edges of their world. He was a father, a guardian, a man whose worth had finally been recognized for what it truly was. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Eleanor's home office, casting warm squares of light across the polished mahogany desk. Eleanor sat with perfect posture in her leather chair, reviewing a thick stack of legal documents. Across from her, Marcus leaned forward, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he carefully studied each page. "These guardianship papers ensure you'll always have legal rights regarding Chloe," Eleanor explained, her voice gentle but professional. "Joint decision-making power for education, medical care, everything important." Marcus nodded slowly, taking in the weight of the moment. "Never thought I'd be sitting here like this," he admitted, running his hand over the smooth paper. "Seems like yesterday I was just the guy with the mop and bubble soap." A small smile tugged at Eleanor's lips. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. Their lawyer, Sarah Chen, sat beside them, her neat blazer and calm demeanor a steadying presence. "The press coverage has been overwhelmingly positive," she noted, pulling out several newspaper clippings. "The Post ran that beautiful piece about found family and second chances." Eleanor picked up one of the articles, reading the headline aloud. "Modern Family, How Love Transcends Blood." Below it was a photograph from the charity gala, Chloe between them. All three laughing as Marcus blew bubbles into the elegant ballroom air. "The Military Pension Board is expediting your case review too," Sarah added, shuffling through more papers. Raymond's evidence was quite compelling. A knock at the door interrupted them. Chloe poked her head in, still in her pajamas despite it being nearly noon. "Is it done yet? Is Daddy officially my daddy now?" Eleanor beckoned her over. "Come here, sweetheart. We're working on it right now." Chloe patted across the carpet and climbed into Marcus's lap, peering at the documents with exaggerated seriousness. "That's a lot of boring papers just to say we're family." Marcus chuckled, the deep sound rumbling in his chest. "Sometimes the most important things need the most paperwork, sunshine." "Like when I had to fill out 3 whole forms to adopt Mr. Whiskers?" Chloe asked, referring to the class hamster she'd brought home for the weekend. "Exactly like that," Eleanor agreed, sharing an amused look with Marcus over their daughter's head. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Marcus started splitting his time between his janitorial duties and helping Eleanor organize a community outreach program through her foundation. The press followed their story with growing enthusiasm, particularly after the military cleared Marcus's name and awarded him back pay with interest. "Look at this one," Eleanor said one evening, showing Marcus a local magazine article. They sat in her cozy library, the space that had once felt so formal now warmed by Chloe's artwork on the walls and Marcus's well-worn books mixing with Eleanor's leather-bound collection. The article featured a photo of Marcus teaching a group of kids how to make giant bubbles at a foundation event. The headline read, "From Scandal to Inspiration, How the Westbrook Hayes Family is Changing Hearts and Minds." "They got my good side," Marcus joked, but his eyes were bright with emotion. Eleanor touched his arm gently. "They got your true side, the one I should have seen from the beginning." The doorbell rang, and Chloe's excited footsteps thundered down the hallway. "That's Miss Chen. She said she'd bring the final papers today." Sarah arrived with a sleek briefcase and a warm smile. They gathered in the living room, where sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows and family photos. New ones, showing all three of them, lined the mantelpiece. "Everything's in order," Sarah announced, laying out the documents. "Once you both sign, Marcus will be Chloe's legal guardian, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Marcus picked up the pen, its weight seemingly holding all his dreams and fears. He looked at Chloe, who bounced on her toes beside him. "You sure about this, Sunshine?" "Daddy," Chloe said with the exasperated tone only a 6-year-old could master, "I've been sure since you made the sad go away with Bubbles." Eleanor's eyes misted as she watched Marcus sign his name with careful strokes. She added her own signature next, the elegant loops of her penmanship dancing beside his steady script. "Congratulations," Sarah said warmly, gathering the papers to be filed. "You're officially a family, though it seems to me you already were." That evening, they celebrated with a picnic in the backyard. Eleanor had surprised them both by learning to make Marcus's favorite peach cobbler, though she admitted with a laugh that it had taken 3 attempts to get it right. "To family." Marcus raised his glass of lemonade. "To Bubbles," Chloe added, blowing a stream of them into the twilight air. Eleanor watched them chase the shimmering spheres across the lawn, their joy infectious. The media crews that had camped outside her gates those first difficult weeks were gone now, replaced by occasional requests for interviews about their foundation's work with veterans and children. "Look what came today," Eleanor said later, pulling out a thick envelope. Inside was a magazine cover featuring all 3 of them. "Breaking Barriers, The Power of Chosen Family." The article praised their courage in defying social expectations and highlighted their charitable work. "They hardly mention the scandal anymore," Marcus noted, scanning the pages. "Because people saw the truth," Eleanor replied. "They saw what Chloe knew all along, that love doesn't care about bank accounts or backgrounds." Marcus smiled, remembering how far they'd come from that rainy afternoon in the school hallway. "Speaking of Chloe, we should probably get her ready for bed. She has that presentation about family tomorrow." "Already done," Chloe announced, appearing in her favorite rocket ship pajamas. "Can you blow bubbles in my room while Mommy reads my story, please?" Eleanor and Marcus exchanged knowing looks. Some routines had become sacred, and bedtime bubbles were at the top of the list. As they headed upstairs together, Eleanor's phone buzzed with another media request, this time for a documentary about modern families. She silenced it without looking. The headlines and interviews could wait. Right now, all that mattered was this moment, with her daughter's small hand in hers and Marcus's steady presence beside them. Their unlikely family bound together by something stronger than law or blood, the simple magic of love and soap bubbles in the afternoon sun. The freshly painted sign above the converted warehouse read Hayes Community Center in bold, cheerful letters. Marcus stood back, hands on his hips, admiring how the morning light caught the blue and gold paint. The military settlement money had been enough to transform the old building into something special, something that could make a real difference. Inside, the scent of new carpet and fresh paint still lingered. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed skylights, illuminating the main activity room with its colorful beanbags, reading nooks, and craft tables. Along one wall, a mural depicted children of all backgrounds, playing together, the artist having captured pure joy in their painted expressions. "Daddy, look what I set up." Chloe's excited voice echoed through the space. She stood proudly next to a table near the window, where she had arranged dozens of bottles of bubble solution and various bubble-blowing tools, from simple wands to elaborate contraptions that could create giant spheres. Marcus walked over, his heart warming at the sight of his daughter's bubble station. At 6.5 now, she took her role as the center's official bubble expert very seriously. "This looks perfect, sweetheart," he said, ruffling her hair. "Those little ones are going to love it." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, carrying a box of art supplies. She'd swapped her usual designer wear for jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "The arts and crafts room is all set," she announced. Raymond just finished installing the last shelf. As if on cue, Raymond emerged from the other room, wiping his hands on his jeans. The retired sergeant had been instrumental in helping Marcus set up the center, volunteering countless hours of his time. "Those shelves aren't going anywhere," he declared with satisfaction. "They could probably survive another war." The center represented everything Marcus had dreamed of during those long years of fighting to clear his name. The military settlement hadn't just restored his pension, it had provided enough funds to create this safe haven for kids who needed guidance, support, and a place to belong. A knock at the front door interrupted his thoughts. A small group of children from the neighborhood stood outside with their parents, eager faces pressed against the glass. It was opening day. "Ready?" Marcus asked Chloe, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "Ready?" she chirped, grabbing her favorite bubble wand, the one Marcus had given her that first day in the school hallway. As families began filtering in, Marcus watched Chloe spring into action. She gathered a group of younger children around her bubble station, her voice clear and confident as she demonstrated the proper technique. "You have to blow really gentle," she instructed a tiny boy in oversized glasses. "Like you're whispering a secret to the bubble." The boy's face lit up as he created a perfect, floating sphere. Throughout the morning, more families arrived. Marcus moved between groups, introducing himself, learning names, and explaining the center's programs. There would be homework help, mentoring sessions, arts and crafts, and special workshops led by community volunteers. Raymond would teach basic carpentry skills, while Eleanor had arranged for local professionals to give career talks. Near lunchtime, Marcus paused to observe the scene. In one corner, a teenage volunteer was helping kids with math homework. At the reading nook, Eleanor sat surrounded by children, bringing a story to life with different voices for each character. And at the bubble station, Chloe continued her lessons with unwavering enthusiasm. "Watch this," she announced to her latest group of students. She dipped a giant wand into the solution and lifted it slowly. "The secret is to move really slow, like this." She demonstrated the proper motion, creating a massive bubble that drifted across the room, drawing gasps and giggles from the children. A woman approached Marcus, extending her hand. "I'm Maria Rodriguez," she said warmly. "My son Diego is over there with your daughter." She nodded toward the bubble station. "This place. It's exactly what our neighborhood needed." Marcus smiled, watching Diego laugh as he successfully created his first stream of tiny bubbles. "That's exactly why we're here," he replied. "Every child deserves a safe place to grow, learn, and just be a kid." The afternoon continued with more activities. Raymond led a group in building simple birdhouses, while Eleanor organized a story-writing workshop. But the bubble station remained the most popular attraction, with Chloe tirelessly sharing her expertise with anyone who wanted to learn. As the day wound down, Marcus found himself standing next to Eleanor, both watching Chloe demonstrate an advanced bubble technique to an awestruck audience. "She's a natural teacher," Eleanor observed softly, "just like her dad." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. It still amazed him sometimes, how life had led him here. From school janitor to community leader, from solitary widower to father and role model. Chloe caught his eye and beamed, holding up her bubble wand triumphantly as her latest student successfully created a chain of bubbles. In that moment, Marcus saw everything he'd hoped the community center would be, a place where children could discover their talents, build confidence, and learn to share their gifts with others. The late afternoon sun slanted through the skylights, casting rainbow reflections through the floating bubbles that filled the air. Children's laughter echoed off the walls, mixing with the sounds of games, conversation, and the gentle whir of fans. Marcus took it all in, knowing that this was just the beginning of something truly special. The first crisp Saturday morning of autumn found Marcus in Eleanor's expansive kitchen, teaching Chloe how to make his famous buttermilk pancakes. The 6-year-old stood on a sturdy step stool, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully measured flour into a mixing bowl. "Like this, Daddy?" she asked, holding up the measuring cup for inspection. "Perfect, sweetheart. Now tap it gently on the side to level it off." Marcus demonstrated with his own cup, and Chloe mimicked his movements with intense focus. Eleanor leaned against the marble counter, sipping her coffee and watching them with quiet contentment. She'd forgotten how wonderful it felt to have a kitchen filled with warmth and chatter instead of the usual silence of her staff preparing meals. "I never knew you were such a chef," Eleanor remarked, eyeing the impressive stack of golden pancakes already warming on a plate. Marcus chuckled. "My mama taught me early that a man should know his way around a kitchen. These pancakes got me through some lonely days after Sarah passed." Chloe paused in her stirring. "Was that when you started carrying bubbles in your pocket?" "Sure was, honey. Your Grandma Sarah always said bubbles were like little bits of joy you could share with anyone who needed a smile." Eleanor watched as Marcus guided Chloe's small hands, showing her how to test if the griddle was hot enough by sprinkling water droplets on its surface. The droplets danced and sizzled, making Chloe giggle. "Look, Mommy, they're doing a tiny ballet." These weekend mornings had become their new tradition. Sometimes they cooked together, other times they packed picnic lunches for hikes in the nearby state park. The simple activities felt like precious gifts after the tumultuous months they'd weathered. Last weekend, they'd explored a hidden waterfall trail, with Marcus pointing out different bird calls and teaching Chloe how to identify poison ivy. Eleanor had surprised herself by actually enjoying the mud on her hiking boots and the way her designer activewear got splashed during their creek crossing. "First pancake is ready for flipping," Marcus announced, handing the spatula to Chloe. "Remember what I taught you about waiting for the bubbles?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "When the top gets lots of tiny bubbles, it's ready to flip." She executed the move with careful determination, squealing in delight when the pancake landed perfectly. "That's my girl." Marcus high-fived her while Eleanor captured the moment on her phone, adding to her growing collection of candid family photos. The afternoon found them at the community center, hosting a weekend art workshop for local kids. Eleanor had converted one of the larger rooms into a creative space, with easels, paint supplies, and enough materials for everyone to experiment freely. "Look at this one, Miss Westbrook." A small boy held up his painting proudly. "It's my family at the park." Eleanor knelt beside him, admiring the cheerful swirls of color. "The joy really shines through, Tommy. You've captured such wonderful energy." Across the room, Marcus helped a shy girl mix colors to get just the right shade of purple she wanted for her butterfly painting. His patient guidance and gentle encouragement had already made him a favorite among the children who attended their weekend programs. Chloe moved between the easels like a tiny art curator, offering enthusiastic commentary and occasional bubble demonstrations when she sensed someone needed a break. She developed an uncanny ability to notice when other children felt frustrated or uncertain. "Sometimes watching bubbles helps you think better," she explained seriously to a frowning boy who was struggling with his drawing. "Daddy taught me that." Later, as they cleaned up paintbrushes and sorted through artwork to be hung on the center's gallery wall, Eleanor found herself marveling at how naturally they'd fallen into this rhythm together. The stark lines between their worlds, her society galas and his modest apartment, her business meetings and his janitorial duties, had softened into something more fluid and genuine. "We should do a family camping trip next weekend," Chloe announced as she helped Marcus wipe down tables. "Tommy said his family goes camping all the time." Eleanor's instinctive response would once have been an immediate, absolutely not. But now, she found herself considering it, imagining the three of them huddled around a campfire, making s'mores and telling stories under the stars. That actually sounds wonderful, she said, surprising herself. Marcus, could you teach us city folks how to rough it? He grinned, the warmth in his eyes making her heart skip. I think I could manage that. Though fair warning, real camping means no fancy coffee maker in the morning. I'll survive somehow, Eleanor laughed, adding camping supplies to her mental shopping list. That evening, they ordered pizza and spread out on the floor of Eleanor's living room, playing board games while rain tapped against the windows. The formal furniture and expensive art seemed less important now, overshadowed by the sound of Chloe's laughter and the comfortable way Marcus had settled into their lives. Your turn, Mommy. Chloe passed the dice, her eyes bright with excitement. You need doubles to win. Eleanor rolled, celebrating dramatically when the dice showed matching numbers. Marcus caught her eye across the board, his smile holding a warmth that made the vast room feel cozy and intimate. Later, after Chloe had fallen asleep on the couch, Marcus and Eleanor sat in comfortable silence, sharing the last slice of pizza. Thank you, Eleanor said softly, for showing us both how to slow down and appreciate the simple things. Marcus shook his head. You're the one who opened your heart and your world to me. That took real courage. Maybe we all just needed to find each other. Eleanor mused, watching the steady rise and fall of Chloe's chest as she slept. The weekend routine they'd created felt like a precious gift, one that none of them took for granted. Each shared meal, every hike, all the community events they hosted together, wove another thread into the tapestry of their unlikely family. The walls that had once seemed so insurmountable had crumbled, replaced by something far more valuable: trust, understanding, and the kind of love that grew stronger with each passing day. The autumn sun hung low in the sky, painting Willow Creek Park in shades of amber and gold. Marcus sat on their favorite wooden bench, the same one where months ago he'd overheard those hurtful whispers about the help. Now, that memory felt distant, replaced by the joyful sound of Chloe's laughter carrying across the grass. Eleanor had suggested they end their Saturday together at the park, a knowing smile on her face as she pulled a familiar item from her designer handbag, a bottle of bubble solution. Not just any bubbles, but the exact brand Marcus had carried in his janitor's uniform that rainy Tuesday afternoon when everything began. Look what I found at the store, she'd said, her eyes twinkling. I thought we could make some magic together. Now, watching Eleanor and Chloe spread a checkered blanket on the grass, Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the setting sun. The past few months had changed all their lives, in ways none of them could have predicted. Daddy, come blow bubbles with us, Chloe called out, waving the bottle enthusiastically. Her dark curls bounced as she hopped from foot to foot, impatient for him to join them. Marcus pushed himself off the bench, his knees creaking slightly. I'm coming, sweetheart. You can't start the bubble show without the master bubble maker. Eleanor laughed, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar. She'd loosened up so much since those first tense meetings, when every word between them had felt measured and careful. Now she sat cross-legged on the blanket in designer jeans, her usual perfect posture relaxed. Master Bubble Maker, she teased. That's quite a title. Well earned through years of practice, Marcus replied, lowering himself onto the blanket beside them. He took the bottle from Chloe's outstretched hand, unscrewing the cap with deliberate slowness just to make her squirm with anticipation. The golden light caught the bubble wand as he lifted it, and for a moment, Marcus was transported back to that first day. The hallway had been dark with rain, and Chloe had been just another crying child who needed comfort. Now she was his daughter in every way that mattered. He dipped the wand and blew gently, creating a stream of perfect spheres that floated on the evening breeze. They caught the light like tiny prisms, sending rainbow reflections dancing across Chloe's delighted face. My turn, she declared, reaching for the bottle. Her technique had improved with practice. She no longer blew so hard that the solution splattered everywhere. Instead, she produced a decent cluster of bubbles that drifted lazily upward. Eleanor watched them both, her expression soft. Then, to Marcus's surprise, she held out her hand. "I think it's time I learned the family trade." "The family trade?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Well, we are a family of bubble experts now, aren't we?" She accepted the wand from Chloe, studying it with mock seriousness. "Though I warn you, I have zero experience with this particular skill set." Marcus shifted closer, his shoulder brushing against hers. "Here, let me show you the secret." He guided her hand, adjusting her grip on the wand. "It's all in the breath control. Not too hard, not too soft, just like you're whispering a secret to someone special." Eleanor's first attempt produced one wobbly bubble that popped almost immediately, but her second try sent a stream of perfect spheres floating across the park. Chloe clapped in delight. "Look at them," she squealed, jumping up to chase the bubbles. "They're dancing in the sunset." The three of them took turns, filling the air with iridescent orbs that caught the golden light and transformed it into something magical. Other families in the park stopped to watch, smiling at Chloe's obvious joy. "Catch them before they pop," Chloe shouted, running in circles with her arms outstretched. Her small hands grasped at the floating bubbles, each successful catch celebrated with a victory dance. Marcus watched his daughter. His heart had decided that long before any papers made it official, twirling through the shower of bubbles. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in a way that would have seemed impossible months ago. This was what family meant. Not DNA tests, or legal documents, or society's expectations. Family was building Lego castles together and teaching pancake recipes passed down through generations. It was sharing bubble solution and secrets, holding hands through hard times, and creating traditions that belonged to just the three of them. The sun dipped lower, setting the bubbles ablaze with orange and pink light. Each sphere seemed to hold a tiny sunset within its delicate walls. Marcus thought about that bottle of bubble solution he'd carried in his pocket for so many years after Sarah died, using it to comfort crying children in school hallways. He'd never imagined one of those small acts of kindness would lead him here, to this perfect moment with his new family. Chloe flopped down between them on the blanket, breathless from chasing bubbles. She nestled against Marcus's side, her small hand finding his larger one. Eleanor's fingers intertwined with his other hand, completing their circle. Together they watched the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in brilliant colors, the remaining bubbles floating up to meet the first evening stars. Marcus smiled, knowing with absolute certainty that this moment, this love, this family was more real than any test could ever prove. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Hayes, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.